Hello, everyone. This is the Casual Fan, and welcome to the Casual F1 podcast, the first one for the 2024 F1 season. And in the first one, we'll be talking about the 2024 F1 season, we'll be previewing it, and we'll be making our predictions as well. So, for the very first edition of this year, I have with me Peter Brook and Jason. How are you, Peter?
I'm very good, yeah. Things are just starting to kick off in terms of F1 discussion again after Christmas. So, yeah, it's starting to get the hype up for the new year.
And Jason, how are you, man?
Good. I'm a Ferrari / Alpine / Red Bull fan now, but it's Ferrari's year, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, but Ferrari and Alpine are fine. Why are you a Red Bull fan?
Well,
They are cheaters.
That's
Do you
true.
not
I
know
mean, that's why AlphaTauri is becoming racing bulls, right? So they can use their wind tunnel more.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Not only that. Yeah. I mean, Zach Brown hates them, by the way, right now. I've not understood it why so much of an outrage out of the blue, but still here we are. Okay, by the way, so the very first edition, what we'll be talking about is we'll be going through each and every team. We'll take a look at three different questions we'll be trying to answer. The first is what is the outlook for each and every team this season. Then we'll take a look at how each of these teams fit in the pecking order. Well, they'll be right at the front, they'll be back markers, they'll have a shitty season, or they will make probably a bit of an improvement compared to how they were last time around. And finally, we'll take a look at how the driver lineups, we'll try to predict how the driver lineup dynamics work, and maybe if we might see some changes in 2025. That's
We
the
will.
first part of the podcast, and the second part is where we'll make our predictions. I have a few ready. We'll get to it at the end of it. So first of all, sorry if I'm rushing a bit. I'm out of practice as well. Okay, so first of all, before we begin, well, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. If you're from Peter's channel or Jason's channel, just do that as well. I
Yeah,
put on
yeah.
I put on some good content.
If you want to help Wheel Sports, unsubscribe from the Casual Fan and resubscribe to Wheel Sports. Thank you.
Yeah. And okay, so I hope you've subscribed already. Also hit the like button, and drop a comment as well. If you don't have anything to talk about, always you can just write Michael Schumacher is the GOAT. If you just write that, it won't be much of an issue. It would, it just starts a conversation, a spicy one as well.
Go
So
TV.
yes, quite a few Lewis fans have already, switched it off. To hell with this guy. He's a casual already. So
Will
yes,
Lewis win a race this season? There's the real question.
Oh, we'll get to it. So first of all, we'll go through the teams one by one. Let's start with Red Bull. So first of all, when we talk about Red Bull, we'll take a look at, well, what's the outlook for 2024. Peter, let's start with you. What do you think?
A very comfortable win in both championships with little to no help from Checo, basically. Like Max can do it all by himself. He's proved that. So,
You do know that there is a Mexican as well in the podcast right now.
Well, I'm not.
I mean,
I'm a Mexican resident, not by nationality.
Nominal Mexican.
¿Cómo tú puedo hacer esto con mi Pérez?
Yeah, what
I
was
am a
that?
huge Perez. I just said, how can you do that with my Perez? Because I'm a huge Perez fan. But I kind of support all the teams, so that's why you'll see me wearing all the different hats. Yeah, sorry. Yes, anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, this kind of applies to every team because we're seeing very few regulation changes that we're basically just going to pick up where we left off, I think, at this point. If it was like 26 and there's going to be huge sweeping changes, that mixes the grid up. But at this point, every team, well, Red Bull are just going to refine their car and every other team is just going to try and copy Red Bull. That's what's going to happen. So there's no reason to believe that anyone's going to suddenly discover some miracle secret over the winter that makes them that much closer. So, yeah. Max is, I don't think, people say, will he win every race? I don't think so, because this year, I mean, okay, so there's the first two races he lost, one dodgy gearbox, although he came within 5 seconds of winning it. And then the second one, he got screwed over by the safety car, but even then he still wasn't fast enough to catch Checo in Baku. But in Singapore, they still were legitimately not fast enough. And even with that, they still got 5th, which is very good when you saw how they were the rest of the time.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely unlikely that they would win every race because something has to give. There has to be a race where something goes wrong, or the car breaks down, or there's an accident, or something.
Yeah.
But it's gonna. I think it's gonna be a very easy 4th title for Max
And Red Bull.
and Red Bull as well.
Yeah.
And again, Checo, he can be there, but they don't really need him at the end of the day to get the constructors. I think.
Yeah.
Like Max can do it.
So
And
Jason, what's your view on
Well, look,
Sergio being called basically a useless wheel?
I mean, obviously it hurts. I'm going to cry later. No, look, I think at the end of the day, like I'm a huge Checo fan, but I feel sorry for him in one way, which is I think anyone going up against Verstappen is quite a tough ask. But at the same time, he just wasn't good enough last year. And as you know from talking to you last year, and anyone watches my channel probably knows as well, even as a Checo fan, I'm being realistic that I think he definitely doesn't have a seat for 2025. I think there's no way they're renewing that contract. And I think I would not be at all surprised if he's swapped out halfway through 2024 if he has another kind of mid-season the way he did last year. Like he brings a lot to Red Bull in terms of compensation, especially in Latin America. Like he's huge. But I mean, as much as I don't know if Ricciardo deserves the seat, but if you wanted to talk from a purely business perspective, Ricciardo swapping in would be just as good in other places in terms of sales and so on. So they've got an option there if they want to get Lawson in. So I fully agree that I think if Checo doesn't really pick up straight out of the gate and carry it through a season, which he has yet to do in Red Bull, let's be honest. Like he had some peaks in 2021, but he's had that mid-season drop off every season with Red Bull so far. So I think he's out the door. As for just Red Bull in general and Verstappen, I think Verstappen is the one to beat. I'm a little bit more optimistic in one way because I agree with Peter that realistically, I think there's going to be diminishing returns if you were to carry this on, but we're still only going into year 3 of these regulations. So we're probably far off those diminishing returns. But Red Bull did switch off development midway through 2024 or 2023. So they are likely to make a huge jump coming into this year. And the real question is, can anyone fight them even for the constructors? Because if McLaren were able to make a big jump over the winter, maybe because they have 2 solid drivers could be in a constructors fight. But I do agree with Peter that if I was to be realistic, it's unlikely. But it would be nice to see. I think Red Bull likely to win.
So, in terms of the gap between Red Bull and the chasing pack, do you think the gap will still be that huge? Because it was at times it was close to a second a lap, 7 to 8 tenths in terms of race pace.
It was 2 to 3 tenths in qualifying, and then 7 tenths to a second in the race. Yeah. So personally, I look at the end of the day, they switched off in June or July, right? Am I mistaken on
something
that?
like that.
So I think and Adrian Newey at one point did say it was a revolution, not an evolution. Now I do think that was partly just to wind up the paddock, but if they've made a jump from 23 to 24, like they did from 22 to 23, then I think no matter how good of a job the other teams did, I think I'd be on board with Peter that no one's catching them. That's that, until they switch off again, halfway through the season.
Okay, so go ahead, Peter.
It's similar to the last 2 batches of regulations, that it was very subtle changes, and because of that, we didn't see particularly big swings in the running order. Because between 2014 and 16, when we had the sort of narrow body hybrids, the only real changes they made were things like getting rid of the penis noses and then adding a wastegate on, and mostly just aesthetic things. And that was why you always see Red Bull running not Red Bull, Mercedes dominating it. And then even the wide body thing, it didn't change a huge amount because, again, it was very, very subtle changes. One that is interesting is the previous year, the V8 diffuser, so 09 to 13, is that each year there was something that made each year kind of different because we went from 11 to 12, from 11 being a relatively dull season to 12 being one of the best on record, and then 13 being one of the worst on record, even though the cars were almost exactly the same as 12. It's just hard to... it's hard to pin. I mean, suppose at that time they kept going back and forth on rules about tire compounds and diffusers and stuff like that. But this, I haven't. There must be something changing in the regulations. It must be probably very subtle, but I haven't.
No,
seen
I don't
anything.
think anything's changing. I think it's a complete carryover. Which I
time around, there's
honestly
no
in
change, right?
these, which I in these regulations I tend to agree with, and I think if you were to play these regulations out, we would get a little bit of a difference if you played them out another couple of years. Because I do think the diminishing returns on these regulations will be quite stark compared to the old ones because they are more prescriptive, and also with the cost cap and so on. So there's only so far you can go. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen yet. Like we're only going into the third season of these regs. So the question is in my mind is how big of a leap is Red Bull going to make? Because obviously I think Red Bull will be ahead because yes, McLaren and, even if you said Aston Martin maybe going back to the start of the season, McLaren later in the season, yes, they were closer at points, but that was when Red Bull switched off or were making mistakes and so on. So I think it's Red Bull's to lose, and I'd be very surprised if Max isn't miles ahead at the start of the season at least.
Yeah. I think so. Okay, so in my view, what it comes down to is, look, there are two scenarios that I think might be at play. The first is the fact, as you said, the diminishing returns. Now again, now something I read from Nicholas Tambazis, the technical director for FIA. I think he was the guy. So what he's saying is that from the third year onwards, the cars will start to converge a bit more because they, there's a reason why these regulations only have a 4 year shelf life. They're very prescriptive. So the proper solution that a car can achieve, the ceiling is not too high. So there may be a possibility that Red Bull is closer to that ceiling. That's something that he speculated. Again, it's not. It's hard to make a call on that.
That would be my thinking, and that is like why I think I'm optimistic in some ways that there is a chance that could happen coming into this season. That Red Bull will get to a certain level, but maybe McLaren or Aston Martin with Dan Fallows and so on could catch. But I think there is the other side, which is these regulations created more differences than I think anyone expected as well. Like we kind of all expected them to look very similar. And I know even some of the internal people in Formula One who were working on the aero thought that all the cars would look the same. And then we're surprised in 2022 at the differences.
And there were 4 different cars.
Yeah.
Even now we have, I think, 4 or 5 different concepts. On the track.
I'm hoping Red Bull show up with a zero side pod concept. That would be hilarious.
Oh, that would be the best thing.
That was the main difference, really. When we saw them, it was the side pods that were different on everyone. But now the thing is, even if they are different, you can't tell because the liveries are so dark that it hides all the features, and they all makes them all look the same. There's no more bright colors that make them easy.
The liveries are disgusting. Anymore. Let's get it straight. I mean, I still remember those Vodafone McLaren liveries or the McLaren West liveries. I used to love them. These are garbage. I mean, McLaren just recently launched its official livery. Did you like that, the orange and whatever?
My first thought was it looks no different to the one they had last year, but also this is probably the last time we'll see it because they're going to have a different livery at every single race. Because with this, they had to spell out, this is a homage to the Marlboro livery. I was like, it looks nothing like the Marlboro livery. It doesn't, because it's the same pattern apparently, but because it's completely different colors, it's not the Marlboro like livery.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just a jumbled mess.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back to Red Bull. Now, just in my view, again, as I said, there are two sides to the whole thing. First thing which I'm worried about is the fact that again, there is one major weakness that Red Bull had last season, and that is something that Max complained about a lot. The fact that the car was not that good on bumpy tracks, and secondly, it did not have the kind of advantage in qualifying that it had in the races. They are two major weaknesses which have been obvious since very start of the season. Now, if you give Newey a lot of time and a clear weakness to work on, that man is going to work on it, and he's actually going to solve those things. So that's what I worry about. That Red Bull
I wonder about
focus
that,
on that.
I don't think
right?
they will bother, though. I think that was a calculated risk that, like, we've got a very, very stable mechanical platform, which means we can run it quite low, but it's also going to give us issues because we've designed the car around running quite low. So when we
Yeah,
raise it, we're going to lose downforce, but we only need to raise it realistically for maximum 2 races. So why
yeah,
bother? I mean, it was like during the Mercedes reign, right, where Malaysia, I think it was always difficult for them. And it was like, why
Singapore.
Singapore was it?
Singapore,
Sorry,
yeah,
it was like, what? Why
Monaco as
bother
well later.
fixing it for that particular race?
Yeah,
If you
but
can
It's the
win,
same with Red
that's
Bull. It's the same
Mercedes,
with Red
no.
Bull now.
Yeah.
yeah,
Singapore was their only weak track last year, and it was the same with Red Bull in the Vettel era. Monza was always their weak track, but everywhere else they were really good.
Yeah, because Renault sucked. That's the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I mean that's always been the problem. Is that it was only about 2020 that they finally got good engines, because that before
Yeah,
that they've always had amazing aero but
yeah.
useless engines, and then they got
I
good
did the
engines,
whole
and
thing
now
on this.
yeah.
I did the entire journey of Red Bull, and these are some of the things that stood out. That one of the reasons why Red Bull fell off in 2014 and during the turbo hybrid era was because the power unit was shit. If it had been in perfect position, Red Bull would arguably, it might not have even been in such a deficit compared to Mercedes. I mean, who
hmm
knows? But still,
Hmm.
there's a very high possibility that it would not have happened. Also, I think that that's actually worked to the detriment of the entire grid, because by 2013, Red Bull specifically had only one major weakness in the entire team, and that was the strategic unit. It was
hmm
good, but it wasn't the best. I won't call it the best strategic unit in the entire grid. The team has worked on that particular aspect for the last 7 years, and right now we can see the kind of benefits it actually has.
Hmm.
Anyhow,
yeah,
as I said about Red Bull, I think they're going to be the favorites. But if ultimately I have to pass a verdict on it, I don't think it will have the same kind of dominance it had last season. At some point in time, you have to expect, look, because this season, again, we'll come to these teams. We saw McLaren make a major jump last season, and we also saw Aston Martin make a major jump when they moved their car concepts more towards Red Bull, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Mercedes and Ferrari did not do that last season. I mean, they tried to a certain extent, but again, that was not the final product. This season, the cars that they'll be having, it will be much closer to Red Bull in terms of the concept. So maybe they'll make that kind of jump that McLaren and Aston Martin made, and probably I'm just hoping maybe the gap would be a bit less. I mean, I expect Red Bull to be faster, but
hmm
maybe the gap would be a bit less.
Well,
That's
I
what I
think
think
I think we
would happen.
could. I think definitely what we'll see is that in the later half of the season, I think we'll have a less dominant season. The question for me will be the first half of the season, because I think that now that McLaren and Aston Martin will likely, for example, show up with their concepts at the base point sorted. It means that when Red Bull do switch off, I think that the closing will happen quicker. Um,
Probably.
but the start of the season is the big question for me. I mean, I guess we'll see at Bahrain, like, how far ahead is the Red Bull at Bahrain? That's going to be the
Yeah.
real question,
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Okay, by the way, coming to the drivers now, the last thing for Red Bull, I think Jason, you've kind of given the verdict. You don't think Checo will be at Red Bull in 2025, right?
I don't think so. No, personally, I don't think they'll renew the contract. I think for the simple reason that Red Bull do now have to consider a few things. One of which is that in 2026 they could have a situation where they have great aero but a bad engine, and then they'll need two strong drivers to stay competitive. So, and the other point is that at some point, if Max keeps winning, he is likely to feck off and do something else,
Yeah.
because he wants to do that. So I think they'll want to get a Lawson or someone else into the AlphaTauri sooner rather than later, which means opening up a space there, and that is going to mean that someone is going to have to go. And I think they've got Ricardo there for the moment. And do I think Ricardo deserves a seat any more than Perez? Probably not at the moment, but I think that Red Bull know how to extract performance from Ricardo very well, and I think he's also a marketing asset. So it's win-win for them. There's nothing to lose, and it opens up that space. Personally,
Hmm.
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yeah,
Peter.
Checo has killed the year already by saying he's going to fight for the title, because Bottas said the same thing, and it means he'll win 2 races at the start of the year and then just lose everything else. That's not
Yeah.
just accept that you're Barrichello.
Yes,
Just be the number two.
I think
Don't
love
pressure-
him or hate him, Verstappen is driving like a Schumacher. Like he's
Yeah.
that is the
I was
kind of
about to say
driver
that.
he is.
He would do so much better in quality and races if he was targeting second and not first every time. Just do that, and that's all they expect from you.
He won't
Be
do
like
that though.
be like a
Yeah.
famous Ferrari Irish driver named Eddie Irvine. He
Don't
accepted the
be like
second
Eddie
driver.
Irvine. I don't like Eddie Irvine. We've talked about this.
Why?
Because I met him in person and he was
okay,
an
okay,
asshole.
okay, yeah.
So
I remember now. don't meet your heroes. You know,
no,
they
because
say-
as we talked about before the podcast started, every Irish person knows every Irish person. So I met Eddie Irvine in a bar and I didn't like him. So ever since I've been like, I don't like you.
yeah.
So,
Still,
But he-
I mean, in terms of being a number two driver, I don't think
Yeah.
anyone has done the job better than he did. He was
That's fair.
fine. Yeah, I mean, he was fine with being a second driver. No issues. He'll test the parts. He'll do everything. He knows that he's there to be second to
Okay.
Michael.
Can I ask
That's what
a
Sergio needs to do.
quick question for both of you? Obviously, not to drag it on, but do you think Ricardo would perform any better? Just out of interest, your opinion.
No.
A bit. I think he'd be more consistent because he's been with the team before and they know him, and just he wouldn't crack as much because a lot of his when we saw this kind of balance shift of the balance and power with him and Max, a lot of it did come from reliability. Because in 2017, Max was having all the breakdowns, and then in Ricardo, it was Ricardo in 2018. Yeah, I think he wouldn't be getting knocked out in Q1 so much. He wouldn't be having quite so many useless race starts, and then doing what Max can do in 2 laps, doing it in 25.
Yeah.
Or something. But the thing is, I'm bored of Ricardo. Like, we don't need him here. He's just this like smiling cockroach that won't go away. Like he's not. The whole point of Alpha Tauri is it's a junior team for juniors to advance, and he's not. He joined them 12 years ago now, or 13 years ago.
Well, he was out of the sport last year. He's a junior again, Peter. Relax.
It's the same like Buemi. It still does he used to do the young drivers test at age like 33.
Didn't Alonso do the young
Alonso did it at
drivers
40.
test?
Oh yeah, it doesn't mean anything anymore. The junior academies are all a sham anyway. But like Tsunoda, because at this point, Tsunoda, this is Tsunoda's 4th season now with AlphaTauri. He's really the one they should be thinking about giving it a go. Even though he's not ready, but it just wouldn't mind seeing a Japanese driver in a decent car.
They're not.
The problem
I
that has
just don't think
happened
they're going to
is-
give him a go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the reason why they won't is because of Honda. That is the
Yeah.
one thing. And secondly, look, my worry when it comes to the driver lineup is again, as Jason asked, the reason why I'm saying no is because after Mexico last season, I thought, okay, this is the time that Daniel is back. He'll be able to do what he used to. But then again, he fell off. And after the season, I actually just tried to look at the races, the last couple of races where Daniel was performing against Yuki, and even overall, if you look at it, the pace was not there. It's not as if you can say that Daniel is distinctively and quite clearly a better driver than Yuki Tsunoda. You could not make that conclusion. And if you can't do that, I think that again, when you talk about Daniel replacing Sergio, I have my doubts that it would happen because last season Christian Horner made it a point that he mentioned Daniel in almost every interview. This season I think he's given a couple of them, and it's been more pro Sergio in as compared to Daniel. Maybe because Red Bull is probably looking at someone else to fill that seat, and maybe because probably Red Bull is not too happy with how Daniel's 4 or 5 races, whatever he did last season with Alpha Tauri, it panned out. They are trying to expand Alpha Tauri, right? So maybe they have a future plan of keeping Daniel there, like they had Gasly, who did the job. Maybe they might be doing something like that with him.
Yeah, I just don't think they're going to promote Tsunoda because I think Red Bull, historically anyway, makes its decisions pretty quickly. And there's been literally zero talk about moving Tsunoda into the Red Bull seat. And I think they've made their mind up. And I reckon 2025, when Honda go, at the end of 2025, when Honda goes, Tsunoda goes. And they'll bring another junior.
Yeah.
100%.
What he did in Mexico really damaged his season.
Yeah.
I think.
I think
even with
that
him,
was the whole thing.
Yeah, that was really what did it, is that he was still making errors like that. But yeah, it's kind of the curse of the Japanese driver that you're there at the mercy of your engine supplier. 'Cause we've had this of Aguri Suzuki with Yamaha, Sato with Honda, Nakajima with Toyota, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They're always linked to an engine supplier.
Yeah, but
and
I
come and
think
go with
UK is
them.
probably the best talent that we've had come from Japan. I mean, Sato was good, but Yuki seems to be. But again, Sato was
Well,
compared against Button.
Yeah,
That is
I
also
like
better.
Kobayashi is the best Japanese driver.
Oh
we've had.
yes,
Yeah,
Kobayashi.
by far the best. Yeah,
I personally
He's never got a good
just
seat.
I do think, just for record, I do think Tsunoda deserves a try in the Red Bull seat. I think on merit, I think he's done enough to kind of at least have a go and see how he does. But I just don't think they'll do it. I don't think they'll give him a chance.
I also worry about the fact that Red Bull is a very high tension environment, and Yuki has not shown the best
That is true. Yeah.
emotional fortitude
He
to
would
actually.
see it as a challenge to try and beat Max, I think, and then would get ruffled because he wouldn't do that.
And then he'll shout at
just-
Marco and then lose his seat.
They need to
like
put
Gasly.
Alonso in that seat for Alonso's last year. That's what they need to do. It would be a marketing stunt, and it would be absolutely epic to watch. But it's not going to happen.
It will kill Red Bull from the inside, and we will all love it.
And
would
at this point,
be
maybe
hilarious.
they'll just bring Vettel back if they're bringing Ricciardo. Get him in just for fun.
If they turned around and said we're bringing Vettel back for 2025, I don't think anyone would complain.
Everyone
I think
will be happy.
No,
amazing.
it would be like Prost. It's
Everyone
like
will be
let's just give him one last year in the best car on the grid, and he can have a free championship. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
And it is
Even
hilarious.
bringing Ricardo back. It's analogous to Mansell in '94 that we need someone that we know is good and also is good for marketing, and bring them back in for a bit.
Yeah.
That's
And
true.
it is hilarious. The Vettel as well is so loved by everyone now because, back when he was
most of the mo-
when he was
go back to
dominating,
Twitter,
he was
you will-
so hated.
Yeah, because most of the fan base are too young to remember that. And the same with Alonso. They don't remember Alonso in the Renault and early McLaren years and stuff and that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even the Ferrari years, man.
I love
Okay,
Alonso.
by the
I
way-
love current Alonso.
I like him now.
Yeah.
Like I used to hate him because I'm a big Vettel fan, but now he's fine. I mean, obviously they see this Alonso who's doing TikToks where he's impersonating microwave meals and stuff like that. And
I think everyone loves him after the Piastri thing. I think it was that helped. I
Yeah.
think quite a lot.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And they love Vettel because now he's this like green hippie that's
Yeah.
all down
Yeah.
with the kids,
Long
and that.
hair and everything.
Yeah.
The bees.
And he was
and
just
the
great.
environment and-
I just Vettel.
Yeah,
And also because he knows the sport, he actually knows like the history of it and that's as well.
I also think a lot of the Lewis fans love him because they know that Lewis and Vettel get on. So it's immediately like, well, if Lewis likes him,
Even though
I'll like him.
they used to not get on at all.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
They get on now.
Yeah.
Moving on from Red Bull, talking about Mercedes now. So first of all, Mercedes, if you let's first set the stage. Mercedes 2024. What do you expect? First, Jason, go ahead.
I was smiling because if anyone watches my channel, they'll know that for 2022 and 2023, I gave Mercedes the benefit of the doubt. I thought they would come back raring. And I'm smiling because I've given up on that. And I actually think that Mercedes are going to drop back this year. I've lost faith in it completely. And there's one...
You're just a James Allison hater. That's all.
Yeah, can't stand James Allison, Toto Wolff. No, I think the reason for it is I think that in 2023, I think they were, and I think it's a reasonable statement, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were the third best team the entire way through the year. And they benefited from the fact that Aston were second best at the start of the year, dropped off, and then McLaren came up. So by being third best consistently, they ended up being second best in constructors. And I think that's a fair statement. Again,
I think
feel free to argue with me.
overall, yeah, they were. I think they were the second fastest car overall.
And
Right,
I think they were the third fastest over the course of the season. I think it's just that the second fastest changed, and therefore they ended up being the second fastest across the whole season.
Aggregate, yeah,
Yeah.
that precisely.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So, and I think they benefited from, and for the Lewis fans, from having two great drivers in the car. I will give you that. That I think that does help. But I am just concerned because I think that Aston is in a position where, yes, they screwed up the second half of the season, but I think given... I'm a big believer in the Dan Fallows team. I think like seeing their jump last year and just some of the decisions they made at later part of the season where they kind of decided to run two different setups, test things. I think that Aston will come back with a bang. It'll be interesting to see how they develop. I think McLaren is on the right concept, so they're carrying that over. Ferrari, I'm not going to even try with the hopium, but I do think that Ferrari will start the season with a decent concept.
6 kgs.
They've lost 6 kilos.
What are you talking about?
They've gained 1,000 horsepower, as we were saying, and now, but I think Ferrari, for the most part, have probably are in a good position in terms of just starting concept to develop on. Whereas Mercedes, remember, are the only team I can think of, at least the only team in that front segment, that have to completely change their chassis. And yes, they were able to test some of the aero that they're probably going to bring across, but you are changing a complete chassis out. So while you can make decisions in the wind tunnel and say, right, well, if it works this way on that chassis, then we can kind of extrapolate that it'll work this way. For the first 2 years, they didn't really know how things would work from simulator to racetrack. So I have my concerns that I think they could fall back, and it's going to very much depend on how well everyone else did, obviously. But I reckon they could be behind even Ferrari this year.
So you're putting them where in the pecking order?
But I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm going to look like an idiot by the end of the season, regardless, because I am an idiot. But I think they could well be in front of Alpine, but behind McLaren, Ferrari, and Aston.
That's P5.
And I am paid millions by the French government to support Alpine every year, so I shouldn't be saying that. But I think they'll be in front of Alpine.
That would be their worst performance since 2012.
Yeah,
I think
2011.
Yeah.
I don't have any confidence that it's going to be a better season. I think they'll be fourth or fifth.
What I find funny with Mercedes is that nobody hates them more than their own fans. Like they're just constantly, just constantly shitting on them. They're like, "Oh, you're destroying this team. What are you doing?" And all of that. They keep saying, "Oh, Toto has ruined this team." It's like, yeah, the man that gave them 8 consecutive titles is really what's ruined that team.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like maybe that now we don't live in a meta where all that matters is your engine and you need to have good aero. Maybe that's the problem, and also good pit strategies.
I got shouted at by someone who worked in F1. I love these comments you get on YouTube where I'm like, I worked in F1 for years, and I'm like, cool, what team did you work for? Oh, it's a secret. Oh, okay, right, whatever. But when I said that I don't think Mercedes were ever the best aero team, that's all I said. I was like, I think that they had the best engine, and I think that Red Bull and Ferrari at points maybe did better jobs on their aero than Mercedes ever did. And I was like, it's just an opinion from what I've seen. I've no facts to back it up. And I got shouted at massively about that. But
I mean, the aero is good in the sense that it's indestructible because Lewis's car never breaks when it crashes into anyone else.
But,
I still find it hard to understand.
The narrow body ones, the Hamilton Rosberg ones, it was all engine. It wasn't the aero that was the key to that. It was the engine. And this is the reason that Williams in the hybrid era is just Mercedes but shit.
Yes.
They were good because they had an amazing engine in the back. And it's still the same today, that all they have is straight line speed. And they've got nothing else to use as weaponry.
So where
where would you put them?
I think third. To be honest, I don't know how much further. Well, I think they'll be beaten by McLaren, and again, it's going to be mostly close with Ferrari. I feel like maybe we could see a win this year because what we've seen is that. Okay, so George has won a race, but Lewis hasn't won any races in the past 2 seasons. There have been lots of opportunities where he's come very close to doing so, but he just hasn't had everything fall into place.
So you're saying he's washed, basically, just for any Lewis fans?
No. What he's basically saying is just what Bernie Eccleston said. He said Lewis has failed. So that's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. He just hasn't had everything. I mean, he's had. I've lost count of how many race wins he got because of perfectly timed safety cars or extremely convenient retirements for his rivals or whatever. But yeah, it just hasn't. They haven't had everything land in the way they wanted to for whatever reason. Even though a lot of the reasons is that Red Bull's car hasn't blown up from the lead, which is what they used to do all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, last year when they said, "Oh, we're going in a completely new direction," and their version of a new direction was an old livery and the same aero, and then we're complaining, "Why isn't the car any better?"
Remember that letter by Mercedes after the first race?
This is the thing. It's because their fans are insane and they keep having to suck up to them by like, "Oh yeah, sorry that we've got a car that can only get podiums. We're really suffering here."
Yeah.
It's
That was
yeah.
It's
sad.
so
That was actually a
insulting to
very sad
Ferrari
moment.
fans, isn't it? It's so insulting to Ferrari fans.
They haven't suffered. Even when before the hybrid era, they were still like fourth fastest, and it was like an upper midfield, lower front runner car.
Yeah,
It was never bad.
Yeah.
They've never
yeah.
been like getting knocked out in Q1 every week and
I think
that
the
sort of
worst that
level.
Mercedes had was fifth when in 2011 or 12, something like
I think
this,
it was
when Lotus
12 because
surged.
they I knew that they were consistently fourth fastest in 2011. 2012 was when
Yeah, when
Lotus came
Lotus
up, so they
surged.
had
Yeah,
Red Bull, McLaren, Lotus,
Red Bull, McLaren,
Ferrari,
Ferrari,
and then
Lotus, and then
Mercedes.
Mercedes.
Yeah, so they
Mm.
were fifth in 2012
Yeah.
and then second in 2013, I think.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so yeah, they've never had
So
any
you're
worse than
putting,
fifth,
yeah. So you're putting
and
them
that was still a
third
race.
in the pecking order, right? Roughly.
Yeah, roughly a close. It'll be close with like it'll be close with Ferrari, I think,
I think they'll be
and
Yeah.
fourth.
maybe
Yeah.
there will be a win somewhere.
I think
So
they'll be between fourth and fifth.
okay. So in my view, when it comes to Mercedes, I think okay. Now I'm basically doing some sort of correlation between what happened with McLaren and Aston last season. They moved their car concept towards Red Bull, and you saw a sudden jump.
Hmm.
Mercedes is the only team. Mercedes and Ferrari are the only teams that have not done that, and I feel they're going to have. Plus, look, I know you don't believe in James Allison.
I
I
never
wrote him.
said that.
You just said he sucks.
I did.
So,
I did say that actually. Yeah.
yeah. So I think he's actually a calmer head compared to what we had in Mike Elliott, because to be honest, in my view, the fact that they persisted with that what was it, zero side pod concept, it was complete arrogance from their
Hmm.
side. They
Yeah,
should
but
not, because
Red Bull's coming with a zero side pod concept this year, according to Twitter.
yeah, don't let the secret out. So let's wait for that. So yeah, again, coming back to it, I think, when you have a some when you sorry when you have someone like James Allison in the team, and then you have the whole team moving towards the Red Bull concept, I have a feeling that they will have at least a certain jump in terms of performance.
Hmm.
They'll cut the gap to Red Bull. I don't see them beating Red Bull, because Mercedes is not a complete package right now in terms of the overall thing that needs to be there. I'll put them third. I mean, I'll put them
Okay.
third. Who I put second, I'll tell you later in the podcast. But for me, right now, the team would be third in
Well, if
terms
if
of
if they come
keeping everything
if
together.
they come ahead of fourth, right? If they come third or second or first, I will personally put out a video on my channel clipping this and saying I was wrong, Sharon was right. Go subscribe. But I think they'll be fourth.
You should do that anyways.
No,
No, go subscribe. You can do it anyways.
no.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So when it comes to the driver lineup, I think, okay, one question I had in mind: if Mercedes sucks this season, like you're saying, if it is, if it is fourth or fifth fastest, will Lewis Hamilton retire at the end of the season?
No.
Peter.
I'm still thinking of end of 25.
Yeah.
When his contract's up and we've got the new regs in.
I think I'm kind of considering the same as like end of 25, depending on what he thinks 2026 will look like. Yeah.
Okay, I'll set it up a bit differently. Look, when we talk about these benchmarks or these drivers sticking around for this long, Alonso is obviously someone who has defied the odds in terms of that. The reason why Alonso has done that is because the man is hungry for a competitive car. When
Mhm.
it's obvious, that's why he keeps sticking around and trying to prove himself, even though he's one of the best ever. Lewis does not have to do that. He already has 7 world titles, more than 100 wins, every accolade in the book.
Mhm.
I think one thing that stood out for me was what happened in Abu Dhabi last season, because Mercedes, the P2 position was in balance, but Lewis seemed completely disinterested. He, whatever interviews and everything, you heard him talk, it was a bit like he was done. He wanted to leave. The season was over. He had no interest in whether Mercedes finishes second or third or whatever. And even, we saw, I think Toto Wolff even came on the radio during the race that, okay, you can get the position and stuff like that. And he was, I think, P7 or P8 behind Yuki in a race where Mercedes should be, I think he should be putting the best foot forward. You saw the motivation waning a bit. And if
I
he's
just
spending another season like that,
I think he should have
I have very,
personally. I think he should have retired at the end of 2023 because I just think that realistically, just as a like I've watched Formula One properly since the early 2000s and like slightly as a kid as well, but like once it's I can't think of a driver who comes back from a dominant season when it drops off, because it always takes time for the team to build up again unless they swap teams, that kind of thing.
Michael almost did in 2006.
Yeah, but
If it wasn't for that fucking
young Alonso fella.
Japanese Grand Prix.
But anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just think that like the problem is that even if realistically for Hamilton to get a title winning car, unless Mercedes pulls something absolutely spectacular out of the bag this year, realistically you're talking 2026, because if they don't get this year bang on, then they're going to be behind even McLaren and perhaps Ferrari, perhaps Aston is my point. It depends on what we see. But that means you're waiting until 2026. And then by 2026, you're gambling that Mercedes get the new engine regulations right ahead of Honda, Audi, and a few other teams like Ferrari,
Red Bull.
it's going to be more difficult because it's not like a massive change like it was before. It's electrification more so than the V6. So, and then even if everything goes absolutely perfectly, by 2026, I know George didn't have the best season last year, but I think recency bias plays a lot here. George Russell is a very talented driver, and I think another couple of years behind the wheel, by 2026, he's then competing with George Russell if they get a dominant car. If they don't get a dominant car, he's then competing with Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, depending on who's in the lineup. So I just think the likelihood of him winning another title is becoming lower every year. And I think regardless of, like, maybe he doesn't care about it in his head, but when a driver sticks around like that, they do tend to diminish in the minds of their legacy.
Pretty much. Precisely my point.
Yeah, particularly for him, it's having 2 whole years without a win when he used to be the only driver that had won every year. Is that it's similar to Schumacher's Mercedes years, that it's only tarnishing his record now. But also 26, by then Lewis would be 41 years old, and that would be his 20th consecutive season. And even George, that becomes his 8th season, and he would be 29, 28, 29 by then. And it's the thing is about Lewis is that, and one of the reasons that him and Alonso have kept going so long is because they're both bachelors. But the difference between Lewis and Alonso is that Alonso doesn't do anything outside of racing, whereas Lewis has loads of other passions and projects and things that keep him busy. So he's not gonna. It's not like when he retires, he just sits on a mountain of cash and does nothing. He's going to have loads of other things that he can apply himself to and wants to commit to. So that gives him that incentive over having a family to look after. And obviously, I think he does want the 8th. I mean, he publicly says that he's put 21 behind him. Whether he does actually feel that way or not, I don't know. But I think he still wants. Everyone wants more, but he wants the 8th just because then he does outright have the most, rather than tying with Michael. And he's someone who 4 times now he has finished runner-up and lost it in the final round. So there is a case to make him an 11-time champion on that basis. Even though there's a lot of rewriting of history that would need to take place to do that. But he's somebody who has, he's had opportunities to increase that even further, and it just hasn't always landed for him. But you'd think he would just get fed up of it eventually, because you can't do this for 20 years in a row.
Exactly. That's my question, that after a point, because look, Alonso, I won't be surprised if Alonso is still in F1 in 2026. I would be massively surprised if Lewis is in F1 in 2026.
I would kind of have the same opinion, because I think that Alonso has the benefit as well of Alonso's still sharp enough to be rated. He won the 2 championships in 2005, 2006. So it's not like he's not worried about his legacy being lost anymore. Let's be honest. Like, he's had enough, and he just doesn't care what I think he cares what people think, as to the extent that they're talking about him. That's all Alonso cares
Yeah.
about. If he's being talked about, whether it's this guy's useless or this guy's brilliant, he doesn't care. But I think the biggest
Yeah.
advantage that Alonso has, like you said there, Peter, is that he doesn't have those things outside. And also, Alonso has gone and done WEC. He's gone and done other series. So, he's left F1. He's played around in some other series, and now he's back to get a paycheck and the occasional podium and have an absolute laugh while doing it. And I think he has nothing to lose. Whereas I think there's something more ingrained. There is something more ingrained as well with Lewis's championship, right? He's the only black driver in Formula One. He's trying to push that Formula One that way, and I think that the more his legacy diminishes, the more it also diminishes those causes some way. Maybe not in reality, but I think he will start thinking about that mentally as well. I think there is.
That's why that's the main question why I'm asking, because I have only a single worry that Lewis will be bored after a point. And if he's not performing at 100%, George will start beating him, and he'll start beating him regularly. And once that tide begins, it's very hard to reverse that. Will he want to be a part of a team where he's not performing at 100%? Because look, Russell is not Bottas, where Lewis even on his off day can beat him.
Yeah,
He has to be on his A game to beat him regularly. And I worry, that is precisely why I specifically talked about what happened in Abu Dhabi last season, because Lewis was completely switched off. He was not interested. He basically checked in because he had to check in, that's all. Otherwise he would not even raced. It was that bad. And if the car is not good, if even this season it's the same situation that, okay, I'll come to the grid, I might fight for a podium, but nothing more than that. At some point, a driver who has won a race every season for 15 years, he'll question why he is even a part of its sport.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis has an extremely broad definition of what counts as a bad car, because he's continuously had access to some of the best cars we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen a driver since, you can argue Schumacher, but certainly Fangio, that's always had access to top tier equipment.
Yeah.
The only genuinely uncompetitive car I'd say he had was the 09 McLaren
2009.
for the first 10 races, until they slapped a double diffuser on it and he won the next race.
Yeah.
Because even the 22 Mercedes is a race-winning car, just not with him.
Yeah.
And there were races he could have won if things had worked in his favour. And again, this year, he's always had a car that's at least capable of pole positions, podiums, and wins. He's never had a car that's you're expected to get knocked out in Q1. And
The ones that
lucky
Alonso
to
had,
points.
basically.
Yeah, that's the thing. Alonso is the opposite. Alonso has never had a dominant car. His best cars have always been as good as the next best car. They've never been obviously faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
And even Vettel had, he's had the Aston Martins, he's had the Toro Rossos,
He's had the complete gamut, right?
Yeah, he's had all of it, and Max has had that too. He had several years in Red Bulls and everything else that weren't that good.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
But Lewis hasn't had that. He's always had good cars.
By the way, what's the answer? we've beaten around the bush, and what's the answer? Do you think he might retire, or will he continue?
I think he'll continue till 2025. I think there's no. I think he'll just continue and see out his contract for anything. Even if he loses confidence and decides he's retiring, I think he'll see out 2025, just because so much of his business dealings have to do with Mercedes, and I think he'll see out the contract. Or, I guess they could come to some sort of, agreement between them. But I think he'll see it out regardless. I think he is. I think he's that type of character. To give him credit, I think he is the type of character where, he sees himself as the person who has to keep his word, keep his contract, that kind of thing. I think he's a genuinely nice guy who will see it that way. Whereas I think some other drivers like Alonso would be like, burn it, I'm leaving. Whereas I think he'll stick until the contract.
I think as well, something else that we need to factor in here is a certain Italian driver going into Formula 2 this year that's one of their juniors. Is that in terms of a replacement for him? Because if he is the chosen one that's going to bring balance to Italian motorsports and whatnot, and dominates Formula 2, they're going to we need a seat for him, and maybe they would think about putting him in a Mercedes, and then that might put some pressure on Lewis, even though generally Lewis he's in a position where he has Mercedes wrapped around his finger and kind of can get them to do whatever he wants, even though he tends to claim that they never listened to him when it came to car development. It's like, I don't buy that they'll listen to him when it comes to everything about marketing and how they image themselves and the kind of initiatives that and stuff they
Everything.
want to campaign for, but when it comes to actually
They have
what
a
matters, they're
black
not
car
gonna listen.
because of him. Silver
Yeah.
Arrows is not Silver Arrows anymore because of him.
And they have the Hamilton Commission
Yeah,
because
look
of
at him.
him. And because I think he said he wants to, when he leaves, he's talked about getting some kind of role as a sort of brand ambassador type thing.
Yeah, the
with
role
them
that
after
Michael
he's
had
left.
with
Yeah.
Ferrari.
Yeah,
Something
as well.
similar.
I think he wanted an extremely high salary for it that you would only get if you were driving.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the control.
You got to ask as well from. Well, I guess it doesn't matter as much anymore because Toto and I can't remember the name of the other guy own 66% now, don't they? So Mercedes only own like 33% of the team now, but which actually has
but
been the
that
case
can
for
be
a long
sold
time.
off.
Yeah, but my point is, I think they will question his salary at some point, right? Like
They should. Ideally, they should.
He's
because
being paid as much as Max still,
yeah,
isn't he?
it's 50 plus
More than
million a
that.
year, something like that.
it's more than.
And
I
I've-
mean,
it-
base is more than that. Max gets paid more because of the win bonus and everything.
Yeah, Max gets
Yeah.
the typical Red Bull win bonus, which must have been very nice in
nuts.
2023.
It's another thing. I've always said this, and it's the most socialist I'm going to sound. But if the car is shit, pay your drivers less.
Yeah.
and put that money into the car. Like they're not going to starve to death on 1 million a year.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter now because the cost cap, like, I mean, they have enough money to be at the cost cap anyway, but point taken, like they could invest it in other stuff like CapEx, I'm sure.
100%. 100. Okay, so by the way, just one prediction: Lewis versus George Russell, 2023. Who beats whom?
2024, you mean?
Yeah,
24,
sorry.
Yeah. I'll give it to George, but only marginally. A mixture of him just having more room for growth, and maybe Lewis just getting less and less motivated.
Yeah, I think George as well. I think he'll adapt to the new chassis better, quicker, basically.
We are basically the anti-Lewis Hamilton podcast.
Yeah.
turning
This is the We Hate Lewis podcast, apparently. Even though I think in the last few minutes we've all said he's one of the best, he should leave while his legacy's high, and he's a really nice guy.
Yeah, but he said one line which is not in his favor. So
That's true. Yeah.
I agree. Even actually, I've picked George on all three occasions in 2022, 23, and 24. So yeah, even I'm going with George.
Okay.
I mean, my main reason is because in qualifying I think George had the edge last season, marginally, not a lot, but he had the edge.
Mhm.
And I feel again maybe motivation might come into play, but I think even all things equal, George will learn. Whatever I've seen from his career, I think he's getting a bit overlooked in Mercedes right now, and that is probably something that maybe hopefully Toto realizes that he should not be doing.
George just had a few bad races, but recency bias means he's been terrible for the whole season and he's a terrible driver. It's just the way it works.
Yeah,
He was.
I mean, their only mechanical breakdown happened to him.
Yeah.
As well last year.
and he
Again,
was
it never,
I think,
never happens to
second,
Lewis.
or he was leading something like I think in Melbourne it happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in Melbourne, and then obviously we had Singapore and stuff. I mean, I think George maybe because he cares more because there's more pressure for him because he's for ages we were like get him in the Merc and he's got it now and he needs to kind of meet the expectations and because he knows he's got his whole career ahead of him, whereas Lewis doesn't really have anything left to prove other than I don't want to get beaten by a younger driver.
Yeah.
Plus,
Plus,
it played a role
let's be
last
honest,
year as well.
Lewis is like, if we look over the career, Lewis is the luckiest driver in the world in terms of incidents with his car. Like obviously, I'm not saying anything against his skill. I just mean in terms of mechanical
front wing
failures
needs to be checked.
Yeah, mechanical failures. Imola in 2021.
Just imagine
he has a retirement rate of less than 10%.
Yeah.
I think he's had 26, 27 retirements. Most of those have been accidents. He's had only, I think, fewer than 5 mechanical failures with Mercedes in the past 10 years.
So
when Max had 7 alone in 2017.
So any Lewis fans who are complaining about me saying lucky, I don't mean skill wise. That is exactly what I meant.
And I think one thing that maybe shows this off is that because 22, everyone was saying, the reason he's behind is because he's the one doing all the testing of different parts. I was like, well, that's interesting because Lewis has never really been someone known for doing development work. He's already put me in a good car and I'll drive it because he doesn't do track walks. And it was only in 21 that he actually started doing simulator work.
Yeah.
Before that, it was always just give me a good car and I'll drive it. Yeah. And you can put that down to maybe
then he
supreme
had to
talent
beat
or maybe
Bottas
just
only.
showing how good the car
The thing was as well then, like, so even if you even if you were to take that argument of experimental setups, as soon as George started performing poorly in comparison. I think George even said something like said on a few occasions, "Oh, we were trying something with the setup which didn't work," but no one said, "Oh, maybe George is doing the experimental setups now." It was like, "No, George is a terrible driver." So it's just one of these arguments.
Yeah,
it's nonsense. Anyhow, Mercedes is done. So in my view, I'm rating. I think it will be third. Peter, where are you putting them on the pecking order? Third. Wow. And
then
Jason, you're putting them at
fifth.
fourth or fifth?
Fourth or fifth. Lucky if they're fourth.
Oh, okay. Since it's Lewis, right? Anyhow, moving on. Next, next team we have Ferrari. Wow. So for Ferrari, what's the outlook for 2024? Peter?
I don't think it's going to be much different. It's only going to, if it's going to go anywhere, it's going to get worse. I don't think it can get better. That's the thing, because the moment's gone with Charles. People are realizing he's not him. Who he actually is Jean Alesi. It's not going to happen. Like, Sainz is starting to outsmart him, because Sainz can do his own strategies on the fly and have races where he's just better. Like, Leclerc can wing it on. I mean, I've said before. I said he was basically Gilles on Saturday and Jacques on Sunday, or even Michael on Saturday, Mick on Sunday. He just when it comes to the race, he's much too nice. But he's got that army of Italian teenagers behind him who think he's the chosen one that's bringing balance to the Tifosi and all of that. But he's not dominating Sainz, and Sainz is someone that was a sort of journeyman for a while, that was like, okay, he got beaten by Max and then he was kind of there or thereabouts against Hulkenberg and whoever. And now we've got a situation. It's very early 90s Ferrari. It's very Alesi Burger, where the car is all right but not brilliant, and the drivers are kind of A tier but not S tier, and things are just there might be a win at one point, but it's not. But they're waiting for the glory days when a Schumacher is going to come in and basically win by making
Antonelli will come.
Yeah, he'll win. He'll bring a team that ends up making the team as un-Italian as possible, which is how they end up dominating. I think. It's just depressing. Like,
by the way, I'm wearing a Ferrari hat, but you do know I'm not like some diehard Ferrari fan, so it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I'm a Perez fan, but I've been hurt before.
In terms, yeah, I mean, it's a toxic relationship anyway. If you are a Perez fan right now. Yeah. So yeah, Jason, what's your view?
I think I'm an Aston Martin fan now for some reason, but anyway. With Ferrari, I mean, look, obviously this is Ferrari's year, and until the end of testing, it's going to be Ferrari's year. But if we're talking in actual reality and not dreams of millions of people, I think they'll have a solid year in terms of car performance. Like, I think they'll have a more consistent year in terms of car performance and not issues with the tires. But I can't see them doing. They're not going to be anywhere near Red Bull. I think they'll be lucky if they're anywhere near McLaren. And I think that the biggest praise I could give is I think that potentially they could beat Mercedes, but I think that's more to do with Mercedes, as I've already talked about, than it is to do with Ferrari. Peter, once again, I tend to agree with you on the Leclerc thing. I think Leclerc is a great talent, but I think he's an unlucky guy in some ways as well. Like, I would not be surprised if Leclerc leaves Ferrari and the next year they get a title-winning car. Like, that's the type of thing I think about with Leclerc. I also think one thing I will say is I think that the talk of his mistakes is a bit overblown. I do think that's the fact that I think he drives on the edge too much. But I think, unfortunately, unlike Max, he hasn't learned that maybe he's reeled that in a bit. And I think he drives on the knife edge of the car a bit too much, and that's where the mistakes happen. And I think you're right that Sainz is a much smarter. Sainz is like a Alonso in the car in that way, that he does think about his the entire race, as opposed to just driving and letting Ferrari think about the rest. So I think Ferrari could have a good year. I think in terms of just raw pace and talent, I think Leclerc still beats out Sainz, but it depends on how good the car is, because I think if the car is in any way not perfect for him, then Sainz seems to have better adaptability to cars than Leclerc does. would be my opinion on that. I think Sainz is definitely much better at adapting than Leclerc is. And we saw that in 2023. As soon as the car moved away from Leclerc, he struggled so much, whereas Sainz was kind of able to keep a relative pace throughout the year, even with the car changes. And once it swung back to Leclerc, obviously Leclerc was faster again because it was more in his wheelhouse, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I don't have much
Yeah.
hope for Ferrari, to be honest. I think they'll get a few podiums, maybe a win or two, if depending on how poorly, Red Bull's weekend goes.
So where are you putting them in the pecking order?
Third or fourth? Third. I'll go third.
You're putting them better than Mercedes.
Yes. No, sorry, I'm going to have to change this then. I'm going to put Mercedes fifth and I'm going to put Ferrari fourth. That's the way yeah.
Oh, okay. Peter?
I'm putting them fourth.
Yeah.
Again, because I don't think there's going to be particularly significant changes from this year. And yeah.
It's fair.
Okay.
From last year.
It's fair.
Yeah. So in terms of the pecking order, I'm putting them fourth as well. I think the season will be a step up from what they had last year, because last year was still basically, it was Binotto light. It was basically what Binotto.
Yeah.
That was precisely what it was. But the thing is, the second half of the season, we saw some improvements, and Fred Vasseur has been working on the team. Again, I don't know how much I rate him highly, but I'm still to see the signs that he could parallel what a Toto Wolff or a Christian Horner has done in Formula One.
I think
It takes
think
a
he's
lot to be that.
I think he's the right person for the job right now, because you need someone to kind of rein in the link between the Ferrari company and the team itself. Because since, is it
I think
2014,
what Ferrari
we've
has
had
done,
10,
yeah.
10 team principals or something. Like it's
No,
no, not
not
10.
10.
But it's been
There-
like, how many has it
3
been?
to 4.
3, 5.
Five.
I think we're on
Mattiacci,
the fifth one.
Yeah,
Arriva Bene.
five.
No, sorry. Domenicali, Mattiacci,
Mhm.
Arriva Bene, Binotto,
Binotto.
and now this.
Yeah.
Is it only
That's
5? It feels like more. But yeah,
It's 10 years.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think Mike Crack is now the third most experienced team principal, and he's been around for what, 2 years?
yeah. But I think Fred Vasseur is the right person to, because he's good at those kind of political alignments. Apart from at Renault, he was really that
He's
didn't
smart.
go well. But
He's actually very smart on that front. And yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when I talk about Ferrari, I think in terms of the car, I think we'll see something similar to what we had last year, where the Ferrari car might be better than what Mercedes has. I think Ferrari might win races this year, more than one, with Leclerc. Again, I probably rate Leclerc higher than you guys do.
No, I rate
but the
Leclerc
thing,
highly. I think he needs the right car, and I don't think he's
I
going
think
to get it.
His peaks are much higher than
Yes.
Sainz. It's just that he doesn't hit those peaks very often.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine. What I'm trying to say is that ultimately, when it comes to Ferrari, this season they will win a few races. It will be a step up, but I don't see them challenging for the title in any which way.
No, definitely not.
I
no.
I do rate them P4. That's where I think they fall. I have P3 Mercedes, P4 is Ferrari. I'll say P4 because one of the things that actually came again, I'm probably a culprit of reading too much Italian media, but there has been a lot of talks about how the last year's car was a bit understeery, which worked towards Sainz to an extent. And as soon as the car characteristics changed and started moving more towards Leclerc, he was still again back on pace. I think the last few races we also saw that. This season, again, apologies if I'm reading too much Italian media. The reports, what they indicate is that the focus will now move entirely towards Leclerc. He will have a more arrangement similar to what Max Verstappen has at Ferrari, where at Red Bull, where the car will be made to his liking, not towards building the fastest car and let the driver do his bit.
So Sainz to
And
Audi,
that
basically, is what you're saying. Because if that
no, Sainz will
if that
stick to.
happens, I think Sainz is out of there.
Look, that's why the contracts are not signed. That's my worry, because apparently Leclerc has not signed a contract until now, because even though there are these things where his long term contract is already in place, he hasn't signed it because he wants to see the car in 2024. He wants to see where it stands. Sainz is a peculiar case because I'm not sure why Ferrari is not too willing to sign him on a long term contract, because he's been doing well. But I don't see him getting an equal status now from now onwards. And maybe for
He's doing
Ferrari that might be a good thing.
he's doing too well. He wasn't supposed to be beating Leclerc and kind of showing him up. I think that's kind of one of the problems. But
Yeah,
they need to basically purge their pit wall, because they just have to sort out tire strategies and
I
pit
think he's
stops and
gone. I'm forgetting his name.
Well, you would,
whoever it
wouldn't
was.
you?
The
Just
main
this
guy.
obsession of, oh, let's try plan B, C, E. Within 3 laps, it's like, which one are we going to pick? And all
we are
of them
thinking
always
plan
they have
F.
they have this fetish for like one stops on hard tires, and it's like, can't you ever just try something remotely interesting or aggressive? Because they'll spend the whole first stint poodling around 10 seconds off the pace, and everyone else is passing them. And it's like, oh, we'll catch them later when we do another stint of slow tire saving.
Hard tires,
It's like, just try a
question.
3-stop for once.
Yeah.
Oh
Or
god.
do a 4-stop and just let Leclerc do nothing but quali laps, because that's what he's good at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
Just do something interesting and different.
exactly. I think look,
But
problem
Ferrari
for
don't
is
do
that
interesting things. I mean, people think all Ferraris are good looking. Most Ferraris are terrible looking. And it's the interesting ones that are good
Yeah.
looking.
They live off their. I mean, they literally live off their legacy, because they get that extra bonus payment just for being themselves
Yeah,
as well.
They get the Ferrari
Like,
payment.
they still do.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting in 2025 when the Concord agreement ends. Will Ferrari still have that or not?
Well,
It's a big question.
that's what I think we're not going to get. Obviously, topic for a different podcast, but we're not also going to get an answer on
Yeah.
Andretti until then either. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think we will until then.
No.
So yeah, okay. By the way, to sum it up, do you think Ferrari signs both of them? I mean, they want to sign Leclerc. There's still question marks over signs. So what's going to happen with
for
him?
25 or
Yeah,
26.
25.
Well, I think it's going to be a 2-year contract, right? Because neither of them are going to sign a 1-year contract. Leclerc, the rumor is till
Apparently,
2029, right? Like it's a crazy long
Yeah,
contract.
something similar to Max.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 to 4 year.
There isn't realistically anywhere else to go, unless one of them. Well, Sainz has done it already, but unless Leclerc wants to attempt, pairing up with Verstappen at Red Bull. But
That would be fun, and that would be basically your Prost Senna kind of thing.
It depends if it's. I mean, Red Bull wouldn't want that. Maybe Charles. Maybe he just gives in and is like, okay, I'll just bend over for Max and be his number 2 and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the only question is, does Sainz take a punt on the Audi project working out? Because I think if Sainz called up Audi,
might.
I think he could
might,
get a seat
because
there.
his
I
father
can't- I
drives
can't-
for Audi.
Yeah.
He just
I
won.
can't even tell if Audi's happening, because weren't they meant to take over Sauber, but now they're not?
No, they are.
But they're not going to build.
They
They're
are.
still taking over.
So
Sauber.
the way it's working is it was they're buying 25% a year. So they bought 25% in 23, 25% in 24, 25% in 25. Finn Rousing will continue to have the other 25% as they go into 2026, and 2026 is when it becomes a full Audi Works team. But that 25% a year is supposed to be used as investment in is it Winheim or whatever it's called? The Hinwil. That's
Hinwil.
Hinwil, the factory there. So that's the way it's supposed to work. The only thing I would say, and the worry I would have if I was Sainz, would be that if a recession hits, which wouldn't be surprise, because I think we've been postponing one for a long time now.
Yeah.
I could see Volkswagen Group and Audi just going, right, recession hits in 25, they're gone. Like, whereas Ferrari's never going anywhere, and maybe Sainz would say, I'd rather see how they do in 26 and then jump ship, but it'll be too late. And stick with Ferrari, because
I think there might be a seat that might open up. Who knows? I mean, I actually think Sainz would be wise to actually sign a short-term contract, because that's what Ferrari is offering right now. Sign a 1-year extension, see how things go.
this is what's going to make the silly season this year interesting, because a lot of contracts are up, but you have to imagine that
15 contracts.
Yeah, but you'd also have to imagine that a lot of drivers will just want to see how 2026 plays out before swapping, because the only way
24, you mean?
no, 25 and no, I mean like signing a contract till 2026. So 25 and 2026 is what you'll want, because then you'll see the new pecking order, and we'll see a change around. Because if you swap right now, the only realistic chance of winning a title in a definite way is to try and take on Max at Red Bull. But if you were to swap to Red Bull now, you don't know what their engine is going to be like in 2026. So it's all so risky. So
And Max is there as well.
I think Sainz either takes a punt on going to Audi and hoping it works out, or he is content to be number 2 in an official sense.
And sign a 1-year contract. Basically a Valtteri Bottas contract. He'll continue to go ahead on. Yeah. Okay, now moving to McLaren. First of all, when it comes to McLaren, okay, I'll start with this. For 2024, I think the first basic thing that we have for McLaren probably is, have you seen the whole marketing restructure that the team has done?
They
and the kind
deleted.
of
They
stuff.
they wiped their Instagram account.
Yeah,
a few days ago.
Yeah, not on. Yeah, that obviously that, and
they've done the equivalent
to
of what happens when you get a new girlfriend, right? And you're like, "Fuck, I better wipe the whole thing."
Yeah, I'm married now, so I won't even talk about it. Yeah, so there's a lot of punchy vibe that comes from McLaren right now, and which is, I think it's been a decade since I've actually heard the team even make a sound. Probably the last time it did was when Honda was about to debut, and then everything went to shit. But the team's confident, and every time the team in the last 1 year or so, whenever it has talked about what targets it is going to achieve, it has ended up achieving those. Now, at least in my view, I think 2024 is going to set the tone for McLaren in general, because McLaren's biggest weakness in the last few years has been development through the winter. The team has struggled a bit during in this particular part. If it can get over it, I think McLaren is probably in prime position to be the first in line to challenge Red Bull in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, on the basis that I'm saying we're picking up where we left off, for that reason, I think they're going to come out of the blocks the second fastest and be in the best position to challenge. Because I mean, obviously, the turnaround that they made last year was astonishing. The best we've seen since Jordan in 1998, I think. And to help, they've got 2 very young drivers, obviously very talented, and that as well, who I think it won't be long before they do start tripping over one another. We kind of saw elements of that because at the beginning of last year, Lando was complaining a lot more about the car because I guess he's been here longer and he feels impatient to get his win and get a good car. Whereas I think Piastri was just happy to be on the grid because he's a rookie and that. And we started getting races where Piastri was beating him, even though most of the time Lando was either faster or because with experience, he has better tyre management. He would usually beat him. But it won't be long before they do their egos start to grow and they kind of trip over one another. But for the time being, they're both in probably the best position to be going after Red Bull. So for that, they're probably the most interesting team to look out for because they're the one I'm expecting the most change from, and to be in basically the position that Aston Martin were for the first few races. But they're also extremely annoying because they're nothing like the McLaren of Ron Dennis that was a very serious kind of tough team that had all this history and legacy. Now it's like I feel like if My Little Pony was an F1 team, it would be McLaren. It's just catering to children and teenage girls, and they've got these 2 twinks for drivers that with a combined age of 10 and that it's just such a and I don't know and this whole thing of every week we need a new livery on the car and we're going to pretend it's a homage to one of our classic ones when it looks nothing like it.
It's a homage to the bank account transfer that's just come in, basically, as opposed to anything else.
I mean, every single team is insufferable on social media, but McLaren especially so, I think.
I hate that orange. I'll be honest.
Papaya. It's not orange. It's papaya.
Yeah, it's orange. It's
god.
Whatever.
When Autosport tried to compare it to the Arrows orange livery, all I could
Half
think
the
of
people would not even know what arrows.
That's the thing you shoot out of a bow, right?
Yeah,
I know because I saw that meme and I picture it. All I could think of was the meme from Harry Potter where he's like, "How dare you stand where he stood?" And like this is not a proper orange. Like even with arrows, the wheels were orange.
Yeah,
like they were doing it properly. This one is just a hodgepodge, and it's got those bloody chrome spinners on the wheels or whatever as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
It's just
the Google Chrome sponsorship.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Jason, what do you think?
So I do think they'll be one of, if not the most competitive team, apart from Red Bull, out of the blocks, because I think it is a fair position that, look, at the end of the day, they got their concept and their understanding of it absolutely bang on by the end of the season, and now it is very much build on that. So I think unless they really screw up over the winter, which let's be honest, it wouldn't be the first time. But like, unless they really screw up over the winter.
2013.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, isn't there? But yeah, the only concern I have is I think they could come out of the blocks very, very good, because they just have to build over, and that would be great for them. My concerns is more so they've now moved fully to this matrix system for 2024, which should work in theory, because you've got your long-term concept person, your medium-term concept person, and your short-term. Essentially, that's how they're selling it anyway. I vehemently remember though Adrian Newey saying this is the worst system imaginable and it will never work, or something along those lines, which is why I would have concerns about it coming into this season, and that they could screw up again. Because even teams that I thought would do quite well with upgrades had huge issues with upgrades. Aston Martin, so McLaren could come into the season with all of the right works and then go completely in the wrong direction trying to catch Red Bull. It could easily happen. So
I mean, yeah, when Peter talks about the fact that this has no resemblance to Ron Dennis's McLaren, I think this is one area where it does. That matrix system, I found it very confusing the first time they talked about
yeah,
it.
and the last
But
time they
again,
brought a matrix
2011,
system
2012
in,
was this.
like they could have brought a matrix system in and bid the team to essentially have a very good chance at winning 2010, 11 and 12, but instead, or 11, 12 and 13, but Newey left because of the matrix system, and obviously because of the excitement of Red Bull. But that
But again, it was politics as well.
yeah, of course, there was part of that.
Played a role.
But he was very adamant about how, like, he was very adamant that it wouldn't work. So I'll be interested to see if it works. Now, you could say Ferrari have been using a matrix system for a long time now, and that's exactly my point. It doesn't work. So let's see how that goes. But in terms of drivers, like, I have a lot of respect for Lando Norris. I think he's a very, very capable driver. I think he deserves to have a race win. Maybe he has Leclerc's luck in some aspects. But I think the problem is, and I think Peter hit the nail on the head there, the downfall of any chance of Piastri beating Norris in the first season was tyre management. F1 right now is... Tire management for rookies is one of the biggest issues, because they don't have thousands of miles of testing like they did when Hamilton and Alonso and all of those drivers started. So getting used to the tires is a huge part, and I think Peter hit the nail on the head there.
It's going to take some time.
That's where, but I think Oscar by the end of the season was getting on top of it pretty good. So it's going to be interesting to see how close those two are, and could they step on each other's toes? Maybe that could cause some issues.
Possibly. So, in your view, it's second, right? You'll put McLaren as a second best team. Jesus.
I think second, but yeah.
Yeah. In my view as well, I'm putting McLaren as second, probably because they have the best launch, because they were pretty good last season, and secondly, because I think Stella made a point that the last upgrade that the team brought was somewhere around, I think it was around Mexico or something, where the last upgrade was brought. And since then, the team had the team had shifted focus to 2024. Maybe that helps, but at least they have the baseline that Ferrari and Mercedes does not at this stage. That might play a role.
See,
plus the two drivers as well.
I have to go third because I have to disagree with you guys on everything. Otherwise, it's boring. But
I know where you're going.
Also, I'm a massive fanboy now of a new team on the grid. But anyway, well, they're not really a new team, but a new, recently rebranded team. But we'll talk about it. And because of one of their drivers just being an absolute legend. But anyway, yeah.
Lance Stroll.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking
Of
about
course.
Hulkenberg.
My
of
brain
course.
went My brain went
Oh,
Alfa Romeo with steak or whatever they call now, and I was like, Bottas? Is that what you're like?
No, I'm a massive fan of Joe. Being paid wild
oh,
amounts of money by the
we
Chinese
should.
government. No,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
So, by the way, you don't think there will be any flare up between Lando and Oscar in terms of it leading to a situation where they have to part ways?
no, I don't think so. I don't think it'll get to that because I think that Oscar will put much more pressure on Lando this year. Because I think he'll get on top of those tire issues. I think in terms of pure pace, I think Piastri pretty much came out of the gates there. Like I thought he was really, really impressive over the course of the season. But I think at the end of the day, like I say that at the end of the day too much. I think it will be a case where I think Norris will still get preferential treatment if, in certain circumstances. And I think when Norris is on it in terms of qualifying, I think he'll push himself ahead anyway. So I think maybe in 25 or 26 we could see those issues. I don't think this year, personally.
Where do you put Oscar in terms of these new talents? I mean, keep Lewis, Max, and Alonso side. Where do you put Oscar amongst Charles, Norris, George, and Oscar? Where do
I personally
how
would
would you
put
rate them?
Piastri
How
up there with Russell in terms of I think the two of them are quite good overall drivers. Whereas I think, as we've talked about already, I think Leclerc is an epic talent in when everything's going right. But I think George and Piastri will be more rounded, capable drivers. Personally, so I'd put him kind of on
and
that level.
Piastri's
Norris?
advantage is that he doesn't care about
Yeah,
anything, so he doesn't get rattled. The other drivers care way too much. That's the
yeah.
thing. He just
He's got
I mean, that's
Australianism.
actually very yeah. There's a lot of Australian. You can see those tendencies where he's very laid back. He won't really have, and he's funny, but in a very subtle way, and he's actually growing into his role. I'm actually waiting for a day when Piastri basically loses his lid and starts shouting on a team radio, because even I think it was Hungary or which race where I think Norris undercut him and got the jump on him, and even then Oscar came on the team radio and like, what the fuck was that? It was in a very calm voice.
Yeah, he needs to
He didn't
establish
really make too
himself a
much
bit
of
more,
a
but I think you're right. I think it'll happen.
yeah.
You know. hmm
In the long run, do you think he overtakes Norris at McLaren?
I'm not sure because I rate Norris very highly, if I'm honest. So I want to see where it plays out. But I think if anyone can, yeah, Piastri would be a good bet.
Peter?
I think he could, in terms of the amount of progression he made this year alone. I think he could eventually creep ahead.
Yeah.
But by getting into Norris's head mainly, because Norris, he still hasn't recovered from Sochi 21.
Oh, it was such a heartbreaking race to watch.
Yeah.
It's okay. We had Abu Dhabi after that.
I have to say, if you ask me which race was, see, I'm not a Verstappen or a Hamilton fan, so I think actually for me, Sochi would have been more heartbreaking. Like Abu Dhabi was just
For me,
brilliant television.
For me, Hungary was heartbreaking. A Vettel podium was taken away. A Vettel P2 was taken away.
See, Abu Dhabi was
We should
basically
not be
just
doing that.
peak Bernie Eccleston Formula One, so it was like nostalgia for me, if I'm honest.
Look, I'll tell you something. In Abu Dhabi, if Michael Massey had just done everything one lap earlier, I'm telling you, even then the outrage would have been the same. Even then they would have found
Listen,
some
I
reason or
think
something to
this is
have
a
the same
bad road to
happen.
go down to.
But yeah, they pull the rule that you need a complete lap of after everyone's unlapped themselves, and then you can do it. It's like, well, that's a stupid rule that wastes
Also-
time. So he
Yeah.
was right to
Also,
ignore it.
all rules around the safety car are completely pointless because I think it's Article 15.3 or 13.1, I can't remember which, that says that the race director has complete overriding authority
Has
on every
overriding-
decision to
overriding.
do with the safety car, so he can do whatever the fuck he wants. And that rule is still there in the new regulation. Or the new,
It has not been
yeah,
changed.
So,
Yeah,
And basically that's what
and
Michael
that
Massey
is
used.
why Mercedes didn't protest, because that rule is specifically there. And if it had gone to the international court, it would have been like, tough shit, it's there. We'll
Yeah.
change it. So
Precisely. And in my view, Again, I have not given my view on this. Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. I won't be surprised if Oscar Piastri beats Norris this season.
I think it'll be close. I definitely think it'll be close. I just think Norris may pip it out, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Coming to Aston Martin now, the fifth team. Oh yeah. So first of all, Jason, go ahead. What's your view? What do you expect?
Well, like I have to be on the Aston hype train because I think it's the only thing I've gotten right in like 3 years. Because I made a video at the end of 2022, and I specifically said in that video, Alonso and Aston Martin will be the closest challenge to Red Bull in 2024. And I said that in, I think it was September or October of 2022. And the comments were hilarious because it went from "you're an absolute moron" to "testing in 2023." I was like, how did you know? And I'm like, I didn't. I was just making a punt. The reason there's two reasons I have a lot of faith in that team. One of them is Alonso, because I just think Alonso, if you give him the right car,
Because Alonso has such a great track record of building cars and having
Alonso
every
is
team
basically
improve. Every season he's part of a
he's
team,
always
right?
a great team player. I mean,
Ferrari,
yeah,
McLaren, Honda,
yeah,
you name it.
yeah. But I look,
Every team
I
improved,
think in
right?
fairness, my point is, if you give Alonso the right car, a car that is fast, it doesn't matter how it needs to be driven. It doesn't matter where its performance is. If you give him a car that has some performance somewhere, he will find it and he will use it. No matter how old he is, I love Alonso. I think he'll do a good job in the car. The main reason, though, I have a lot of confidence in that team is I do think that particularly Dan Fallows and his technical team, I think there is a strong team there. I think Stroll, love or hate, no, I mean Lawrence, not Lance. Fuck Lance. But Lawrence Stroll, I think, is the type of guy who will just throw everything at a problem to win. And I think they did some very clever investment running up to the cost cap, and they've done clever investment since. And I think they're a team on the up. Will they be able to challenge Red Bull? Probably not. Will they be a title contending team between now and 2026? Probably not. But I have some hope that I think that they made the right decisions last year when they screwed up their, they tried to kind of claw back after the upgrades went wrong. But I think they did make the right decisions of, let's start testing some ideas. Let's start thinking about 2024. And I think, unlike other teams, they kind of gave up on the idea of getting back to wins or to podiums and just said, let's start testing stuff. And I think the thing is, McLaren should by all rights be up there, but I would not be surprised if we see Dan Fallows and his team come back with something from the failure to learning quite well. I have a lot of faith in that team. And I also think it would be boring if it was Mercedes, for example, who won. Aston's out of nowhere would be great to watch.
Why do you have to pick on Mercedes?
Because they won for so long. It's like, to be honest with you, if we get to 2026 and Red Bull or Mercedes are the front runners, either or, I will be not annoyed, but I'll be disappointed. Like, it's time someone else takes up the championship. If that's McLaren, great. It's been an age since it's McLaren. If it's Ferrari, great. It's been an age since it's Ferrari. If it's Aston Martin, great, because it's never been Aston Martin. So, it would just be fun to see someone else.
It will be Alpine. It will be
I hope
Alpine.
so, but it won't be. Alpine's going to be sold off soon anyway. Let's be honest.
I thought the same about Haas. Anyhow, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, beginning of last year, I was so pumped and excited for Aston Martin, and I jumped on the Alonso hype train. I then jumped off it at Spain and flew into a tree. And I was like, at first I was like, okay, this is going in a sort of Ferrari 2015 direction where he's going to finish third in every race and maybe he'll get a win. And he was supposed to win in Spain and then it just never happened.
Finished behind Lance.
I mean, he was...
and he was waving to the crowd on the...
I know. I think he knew that the plan was that he would win there and get his first win in 10 years, exactly 10 years after Spain 2013. And he would shit all over the record for longest gap between wins, both in terms of number of races and actual time that's passed. He would more than double it in both cases. And it just didn't happen. And then the mid-season slump, and then it kind of picks up at the end. But yeah, I think it still looks a bit fractious because we saw after Mexico, there were all those rumors being spread by this Spanish journalist that, they're going to try and sell the team, or Lawrence doesn't want it anymore. Because as good as Alonso was, we had this dark cloud over the team that was Lance, just taking that seat and contributing essentially nothing and just being so far behind. And now people are really getting tired of him because he's just not delivering, and he looks like he just doesn't care or doesn't even try
Yeah.
anymore.
The rumors of him pursuing tennis at 25 years of age. I mean,
Yeah.
how easy do you think they think that tennis is? That
Pretty
anyone
easy.
can
Come on.
move. Such a,
I don't think it's not like F1. You can't just buy the world's best racket and suddenly
yeah,
start
Well,
beating
if you
up the
bought an AI
you can buy up the
robot racket,
players.
maybe that plays by itself, then yeah.
yeah, or has some extra elastic strings so it hits the
Or you
balls
just do the
harder
Russian
and
method and poison all of your competition. I mean, I can be.
yeah.
When you've got Stroll money, it's all
But
possible.
yeah, but he was just getting in the way. But the thing is, he has to be there because his dad is there and his dad's invested in him and brings all the money. But it's like there are other billionaires in the world that could take that up if they want. It was just a shame that it flopped so much
So much.
mid-season, even though they kind of picked it up towards the end. But it did mean it took some of the flack off Lance, because at the beginning of the season it's like, okay, he's costing them second in the constructors, and then in the last race he almost gave them fourth. Like it didn't make
By
so much of a
accident.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically by
It's-
accident.
I think as well, though, I think the difference now is I think there's been a big gamble made by Lawrence on Aston Martin itself, right? And like obviously the reason Lawrence got into F1 was for his son, let's be honest. Like that's the obvious reason, and that's why he stuck around for so long. But Lawrence also has his own racing track in his back garden. He has a ton of cars, and part of that collection is a big Aston Martin collection. He's loved the brand for ages. And I think even if Lance leaves the sport now, whereas before I would have said the investment will stop and Lawrence will leave, I think I have a bit more faith in Aston Martin compared to just Lance Stroll or Lawrence Stroll, because I think he'll stay invested because it's a huge business opportunity, and I do think he loves the brand. So yes, I think Lance should go, but I think Lawrence will stick around regardless now, which is why I have a bit more faith in the 2026 project in some ways.
I might actually come across as very boring in this case because, in my view, I think what 2023 showed was that the team, it is basically carrying too much dead weight with it in terms of Lance Stroll. Not that he's dead or he's excess fat, but anything. But the thing is, you can't win championships this way. You can't be a top running team this way because look, one thing that became quite clear last season was that drivers were making a lot of difference in terms of finishing positions. When you have two Alpine drivers finishing on podium on random places, that's not because the car was good. That's because they had a freak good weekend. And if an Alpine can finish on a podium and a Lance cannot, while Alonso has 8 podiums, there's something clearly wrong. That team cannot grow until you have two drivers at least have some semblance of competitiveness. It does not have that. And I think, look, the problem with having someone like Stroll in a team is that when when all is said and done, you don't have all you don't have all cylinders firing in the right direction. You have something that is pulling you back. Mike Rack is spending half his time pretty much preparing media debriefs of what he's going to talk about Lance, how he's going to paint him in a positive picture. And that's not how you grow a team. That's just not how you're going to win
The,
championships. And I really don't see it. I mean, I know again the car was good, everything's fine, but first you have an Alonso who has a poor track record in terms of developing cars. Then you then you add to it a dead weight in Lance Stroll, and then you have a season like 2023, which was, look, it started well. There was something that put them on the wrong direction. Again, the way they kind of recovered was very impressive because they threw the kitchen sink at it, and again it was nice. Again, everything was fine, but at the end of the day, you have two drivers that are going to drive this car and try to extract the results.
And they should
You'll
have.
always have a
Aston
liability,
realistically should have
right?
finished higher up in the constructors, but like if Lance had been
They should have been
if
second.
Lance had been anywhere close to Alonso throughout that season, then even if he carried the points over, they would have finished much higher than fifth.
Look,
So
look, an Ocon, a Gasly, or an Albon. These are your second tier drivers. If they were alongside Alonso, they would have got a podium, a couple of podiums, a few more. The thing is, you cannot the team cannot function this way, and they have to seriously look at it. If they are serious, if they want to succeed, Lance has to go, and I don't think.
Well, I'm putting them second because I have become an Aston Martin fanboy and Alonso fanboy for some reason over the past season. I thought that was one of the most fun parts of the season. In a season where we knew Red Bull would win, I just loved it. So I'm putting them second, knowing full well that in reality, even if they come out with the second best car, they will likely be third because of Lance Stroll anyway. But yeah, that's just
they'll be fifth
because of Lance Stroll.
Look, yeah. I will not be surprised if Alonso is fighting for the pole position and Lance will not even be in Q3.
Yeah.
Well, this happened last year as well.
So
quite a few times.
So I'm putting them in second. You guys have put them where?
I'll put them at sixth.
Sixth. Jesus.
Fifth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter?
Fifth, yeah.
Yeah, fifth. I think because it's just the only analogies I can make are Japanese drivers. I'm comparing it to BAR. The gap between like Button and Sato, or even
Rosberg and Nakajima.
Yeah, Rosberg, Nakajima, Parnis, and Nakano in '97 as well. Because that was an amazing car that just never got wasted, basically. And yeah. It's just too big a gap, because if you had Lance in the Red Bull,
Michael and JJ Leto, Michael and Jos Verstappen.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If you had him in the Red Bull as a number 2, I mean, they still would have won the constructors because Max did it single-handedly. Yeah. But he would have scored probably maybe 150 points at the most or something. Probably not one podium.
Yeah,
a lot more Q2, Q1 eliminations than Checo.
Mm-hmm. And that's saying something.
The good news is I think Lance goes at the end of this season, at least for a year.
Look, if that happens, I'll be more than happy.
If
Lance goes,
I've made the prediction.
If Lance goes, 2024 is the season is successful.
At the end of 2024. I think he takes a year out to go and drive the WEC Valkyrie for his daddy in Aston Martin.
Oh yeah,
and I think
this is going to be his 8th season now, and he's only 26 or something.
I think Daddy will convince him to go and drive the Valkyrie. Daddy's going to pump all his money into that Valkyrie so that Aston Martin,
the Adrian Newey project, right?
He can stat pad and get a couple of free wins in
exactly, and then in the meantime, the Aston Martin share price goes through the roof because Lawrence Stroll pays for a decent second driver, and Alonso and that second driver can rack up points, for the whole season.
Yeah, I mean anyone, just anyone.
Felipe Drogovic just becomes a skeleton because everyone forgets about him.
I think it'd be maybe Tsunoda, or he'll pay massively for Albon or Sainz or someone. He's obviously not going to get a top tier driver, I don't think, over, but.
Yeah, why have you not? We've not mentioned Albon anywhere. Right?
We haven't got to Williams yet. So
in terms of,
I mean, we're only 2 hours into the podcast, so we've still got a while to go.
Yeah.
Well, we've done half the team, so we're getting there.
We'll break for lunch at Alpine and go.
Yeah, or dinner in my case, and bed for you. Yeah,
I'm way past my bedtime, man. Yeah. Okay, now moving on to Alpine. I think Jason will take over.
Alpine are going to win the championship. This is it.
Now put the tequila down.
Okay. I was about to pull my green screen down, and then I realized you're in control of the background because I've got my background that I think you've seen on my channel, where it's a warehouse just full of cheese, wine, and cigarettes with all of the Alpine merch, and I'm like, Alpine's paid me a fortune, and I bought the Alpine cap and everything. But yeah, no, they're going to be terrible. Yeah. I can say it on your podcast. On mine, I need to keep that cash coming in from the French government, so I'm going to obviously say they're going to be brilliant. But here, I'll be realistic. They've got 2 midfield drivers driving an absolute abysmal car for a team that has no right, I would say about as much right at the moment to be on the grid as Haas. So they need to sell the team, bring in someone who actually gives a shit and get on. Bring back Flavio, but he's on Epstein's Island list, so he can't come back now.
Yeah, screw him. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of last year, in the DRS Stream podcast, we were doing our season reviews, and I was constantly being asked about what I think about Alpine and what they did, and I was like, I just don't care. Like, I just do not care about Alpine at all, because they hang around. I mean, they're now the only team actually in the midfield, and we saw that in a lot of races. They were just running around by
They fa-
themselves.
they've continued to find a way to be in the midfield on a grid which only has back markers and front
Mhm.
runners.
I mean, Team Endstone hasn't really moved much for a very long time now. I mean, this is Alpine. It's not really a French team because the drivers are French and blah blah blah. But like their base of operations is in the UK. A lot of the staff are British. I mean, the few staff they still have. I mean, I don't know how the team is functioning because there doesn't seem to be a team principal. I'm not sure if there's even like a chief designer
Bruno
or
Faman.
how many people are on the pit wall now. It's going to be like Brabham. It's going to be like Holman, Jack Brabham, like Ocon and Gasly are just going to be doing everything
Deadpool
themselves
GP.
and deciding their own strategies. But yeah, it doesn't like. I think both of them want out because they can see it's a dead end, and the team's probably just going to run out of money and collapse, and somebody else will buy that factory in Enstone and try and attach another brand or manufacturer onto it that's got nothing to do with anything, like another variation of Lotus that's not actually Lotus, and another version of Renault that isn't actually Renault or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just not that interesting anymore. I mean, they lost Alonso and they lost Piastri, and
they could have had Alonso.
Renault has continued to.
They could have had Alonso and Piastri. Think about that. And instead, they've got French midfielder 1 and French midfielder 2. Like, it's useless.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I mean, look, you put both of them in the car. The car is still shit. What can anyone do with that team? And for me, the biggest issue has been the lack of self awareness of a team or of a brand. It's you can look at Renault and you can look at Alpine and you can see a lot of similarities with how Ferrari used to conduct things.
They want to be a French
Because
Ferrari, don't
there
they?
is they
Which
wanted
they
to be a
are.
French Ferrari. They've achieved it in terms of being made a mockery of entirely. When you talk about Ferrari, you talk about indecisiveness, you talk about political mess behind the closed doors, and you talk about continuous you talk about the fact that the team will continue to underachieve, always reach a plateau and then go back.
Yeah.
That is what Ferrari has been doing until since 2008. What Ferrari has done is Ferrari has had a shit season, then it had a decent one where it got close to a title, then it went back. Then again it had a shit season, again it got close to a title, then it got back. What Alpine does, it has a shit season, it gets closer to being the head of the midfield, and then it goes back. It's basically a midfield Ferrari, and it will never
This
go.
is
It doesn't.
sorry. No. I was just going to say the problem with Alpine, the serious key issue with Alpine is it's like it's like either running a business or sex, right? It's expectation versus reality, and if
Yeah.
you rate yourself as terrible in bed or your business is a really low brand, then anything above that is decent. But when you're supposed to be here, anything below that is terrible. And the problem with Alpine is it's a works team.
Yeah, it's basically the stupidity of knowing that in Formula One, if you have to win, you have to put in money. Like, there are 70 years of Formula One and 70 years of data which shows that unless you put in money, you are not going to have
But
proper
it's a
results.
works team.
And then you have two morons in Gene Haas and in Luca Di Maio who have only one thing in mind, that we will not put money, we will be more efficient. Genius that has not worked in Formula One in 71, 72 years. How do you think you're going to find
you've got
an innovative
you've
way
got
to make
Red
it
Bull,
happen?
Mercedes, and other teams that are saying, right, we'll put the money in and be
Ferrari.
efficient, and you've got Alpine, they're saying we'll be efficient but not put the money. But that's my point. They're a works team. Like, realistically, right? And this is the same thing. If Ocon and Gasly were, I think Ocon and Gasly are decent drivers, but I just don't think they're top tier drivers, right? I think they're good midfielders. Yeah. The problem for me with Alpine is that expectation versus reality. This is a works team. It's a full, Alpine is just one of their brands, but it is basically the Renault team still. And this is a Renault team that has won championships in the past. And instead, this time they've gotten, they've tried to get an engine freeze. They're not investing, and they've got two drivers who are rejects from top teams and put those in, and that's what they've done. So it's just not good enough. If this was Sauber, it would be fine.
Two drivers that pretend to get on. Well.
Yeah. The best friends.
It was it like the Scots
since
and
childhood they know
French
each other.
hate other French people as well. So that's
Yeah. I think the funniest thing about Gasly and Ocon is whenever they are next to each other on the track, if one undercuts other, the second person will spend the entire race cribbing
Hmm.
about it and not do anything else in the entire race. I saw it in Qatar, I saw it in Abu Dhabi. It's such a common
Yeah.
thing. But I think for me, how stupid is it that you talk to your team principal that is in place, Otmar Zafnar. He tells you that it will take at least 2 to 3 years of consistent development to become a race winning squad. What do? You get rid of
Hmm.
him, and you don't even have a replacement in
Yep.
place. What and what replacement have they picked up? They've picked up the guy who has already done a piss poor job with the power unit and put him at top, and he's ultimately going to handle both the chassis and the power
Yeah.
unit. How make it make sense for me why you would replace someone who's actually helped the team reach P4 in the previous season and replace him with the guy who's actually responsible for all your
The simple
problems.
thing is, if you took for example, this is the problem again, like I said, and this is just the key point for me is that it's expectations. It's a works team. It should be doing. If we were talking about Williams with those two drivers running exactly what they did last year, it'd be like Williams had a great season. But because it's Alpine,
Yeah.
it's just different. And I think, yeah, it all comes down to management. If you just took the entire Williams team even and said, right, we're giving you Enstone and a Renault engine, that team would be amazing. Like, I think they do a really good job.
Yeah.
But so yeah, Alpine will finish I'd be surprised if they finish sixth. I think they could end up behind one of the backmarker teams this year
Yeah.
because I think
In my view, I think they'll be seventh. I think they'll be seventh.
I mean, when I picture them, I just think of there's that clip in The Simpsons when Mr. Burns and Smithers fire everyone at the plant, and they're like, "We'll run the plant together," and they're dancing around pulling knobs, and I can see Gasly and Ocon taking pictures of each other for Instagram and doing their own strategies on the fly to each other as they drive around. And there's just
they
no
should
one
just
on the
sell
pit
to
wall.
Andretti. That would be,
I mean, the team got rid of Otmar Zafnar and Alan Permane. And Alan Permane has been already snatched up by Alpha Tauri. And you know what Alpine got in the last season? They got Rory McIlroy. They got Anthony
Oh,
Joshua.
this is great, isn't it? They've got all these brand ambassadors in. None of them are French. It's all these British and like American athletes as well.
Yeah.
They couldn't try and get, Mbappe or Thierry Henry or anyone like that.
They got Zinedine Zidane, right? He does some.
It's
I
gonna
think
be
he's
dead.
brand
It's gonna be
ambassador or
Deadpool
something.
GP next year. That's what it's gonna be.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about
yeah,
him.
they
100%. There will be one race with at least one race with a Deadpool
I wouldn't be
livery
surprised.
car.
Yeah.
I can be.
But it's
100%
another
sure.
situation as well where
They're
the
gonna
French don't want to give up. Well, Renault don't want to give up control either because they sold those guys exactly 24%, and in the UK and Ireland, anything above 24% gives you voting rights basically as a director.
Yeah.
24% and below, you basically have no say. You've just got investment. So, yeah, it
Who
makes no
knows?
difference to the team. It's just some
It's
cash
just
that's
15.
not going to go anywhere because the team doesn't need cash, which is ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
Anyway, this is depressing. Let's talk. Bring back
Yeah, Peter,
Flavio.
where do you think, by the way? No, screw
I
him.
still
We will not have that piece of shit back. I hate
You
that
loved
guy.
him before he was on Epstein's list. You're a hypocrite.
No, I hated him. I hated him ever since he cheated. He basically fixed the race. I don't
I
like.
forgot. Yeah, I
That's
forgot
where I
you
draw
hate
the
Lewis
line.
Hamilton so much. You wanted Massa to be the champion of 2008. Sorry. Anyway, Peter.
Yes, that's also true. Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
I think I'm going to say sixth on the basis that the gap was already quite large between them and everyone else last year, and because in the interest of continuity, they might still just be able to wing that.
I say sixth, but I would
And,
not
yeah.
be surprised if they end up seventh. Basically, if one of the other teams
Yeah.
jumps them, It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, the driver lineup predictions. Okay, do you think either of the two will stick around?
Yeah,
Unless they have no other option.
I don't think they have other options.
Because Ocon, he's not a Mercedes junior, but isn't Toto still his manager?
Apparently he
So
is. Yeah.
He still has links to Mercedes, so there is, in one sense, he's a candidate to replace Lewis or George at some point.
No,
but they're
he
more
won't.
likely to.
He won't.
They would be much more likely to.
Didn't
skip someone
Toto
like Kimi
pick
Antonelli.
Bottas over Ocon?
Yeah.
And he picks him over their line as well.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not that loyal. I mean, Paul Aaron just left, so they've only got two juniors now, isn't it? Vesti and Kimi, I think.
I guess so. But they also don't have seats for them.
I think why
Yeah.
do they put Ocon in the Mercedes? I don't think that happens. I think it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, they're just not nearly interesting enough. They're in the position of like Johnny
They'd rather
Herbert
have Charles Leclerc or Norris. They might snatch either of the two if Lewis does leave.
But they're in the position of people like Johnny Herbert or Jean Lacey, where they just hover between midfield teams like Prost and Sauber and stuff like that. Just
yeah. I can't see them going anywhere
until they get bored.
I think they own, like, they don't have any option to go forward up the grid, like, unless, because to be honest,
I think there are reports of apparently Ocon being linked to future Audi. I don't know what it's called, or stake something.
maybe,
whatever.
yeah,
So that is
maybe.
one thing.
But he would have to take a step down the grid for a year, at the very least.
Who knows? I mean, 7th and 8th. What's
I
the
suppose,
difference?
yeah. But
They'll do what every French driver does and just join WEC in like LMP2 at some point. And
I just think both of them.
I think Gasly might.
Both of them have been overlooked.
I think Gasly might stick around because he hasn't really lost the will to be a part. You know, I think Ocon has been around enough, and he's seen the team being whatever it is right now, and
I just think if you're
Gasly
Audi, right? Like, who do you try and get first? Do you try and get Ocon or Gasly, or do you try and get Albon? And I think Albon is the obvious choice there. So I just don't think either of them move anywhere like that. I think they stick with the team, and then we'll see how it plays out.
I think, but first you need to see what. I think we'll get to Audi as well. So yeah. I think, I mean, to be honest, I'm not in that. I think if either of them get an opportunity to go to a decent seat, they'll take the jump without a doubt, because Alpine is not going anywhere, at least for now. So next up we have Williams. First of all, for 2024, what do you think? What's your outlook? Peter first.
I think better, because I think that they're kind of getting into a rhythm now. And Logan Sargent was essentially brought in a year early. So if you count this as that was last year as his sort of testing year, then I think he's got that experience that would help. That being said, he didn't improve that much across last year when you compare him to the beginning or the end. Albon may eventually get tired if things don't progress, but they're still stuck in their position of, let's just put everything down to straight line speed and do it that way. But I like that, even though this Williams is completely different from the Frank Williams and Patrick Head one, I like that they kept the name just in the interest of continuity. I think James Allison is a fantastic team principal.
But James Allison is not here.
James Vowles, sorry, that's the one. Another James from Mercedes. James Vowles, I think he's a fantastic team principal. He's my miscongeniality of 2023. He's just very honest, and I think he was like, we know the car's useless, so we may as well just tell you everything about it and why the floor looks so basic and that. And he does the Vowles verdict, and he was very, very supportive of Logan, because I think he knew beating him down like Helmut Marko would is not going to help him. So let's just try and work with this and see if we can. And also probably aware that none of their juniors are remotely ready for Formula One. That's what's keeping Logan here, is that he's not keeping that seat beyond this year, because by then Franco Colapinto is going to be ready for Formula One, and possibly even Zach O'Sullivan, but that's less likely. I guess just maybe a bit of improvement, but not huge. It's not. I can't see Williams ever returning to their glory days at any point, and not with this driver lineup, certainly.
Yeah. Pete, Jason?
I think a solid 7th again. I think I think 8th. Sorry. I'll talk about why in a minute. Yeah. But I think Williams are on the up. I think they're making all the right moves, and I think they're investing right to the point where I think they should be strongly a midfield team again, instead of a back marker, if you want, in 2026. But I think they're focused on CapEx and so on, and I think that they're still putting the team back together. But out of that back marker team, I think they're probably going to be best. The reason I say 8th is, we'll talk about them in a minute. But I think, I don't see them. I don't see them climbing the grid much this year, if that makes sense, because I think they're already extracting the best of what they can kind of out of their team. So I salute them for that. I think they've done a brilliant job, but I think they still need to kind of upgrade facilities. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of putting the team together. So I think it's a long-term strategy. I think 2023 was amazing to watch. I think bringing Vels in was a good decision, and you can see they're going on the right path. Unlike Alpine, they're going on the right path. But I still think it's going to take more time. I think we're talking 2026 before we see them take any kind of great leap. And even then, there's a lot of CapEx investment that needs there. They've got really old facilities, old procedures. They've a lot to upgrade. So yeah, I think eighth for they should be seventh, but I reckon eighth, because of a really terribly named
my view
team.
as well. I think even I'm going with eighth. But I think that there is actually a source of optimism, if we might call it, because the team actually, well, another another impressive technical director that moved from Alpine. Pat Fry is now a Williams employee, and he has been responsible for building some impressive cars. So I am interested in seeing what kind of impact he has. It might be good, it might be bad. I'm not entirely sure because the team can be a bit
Yeah,
rigid. Plus, the infra is not in place, so there is still question marks on that. But at least I think it should still be. It should do something similar to what it did last season. Maybe a bit better because again, if the straight line advantage is something they continue to go with and build their car around it, maybe there are more tracks where it might be able to do well. So yeah, I'm kind of going with P8. Not too different. Peter, where would you rank it?
Were they seventh
yeah,
last year? I think they
Yeah,
were
yeah,
just. I'd say seventh again. I mean, yeah, just because I feel like they'll just maybe very small improvements,
yeah,
just on the basis of having more experience from Logan and that. But yeah, it's just not the lineup is like Albon is good, but he's not great. I think he was flattered by having Logan as his teammate is the thing, and the car is obviously a handful and not really well suited to a lot of circuits because it just has lots of straight line speed, but not much else
yeah.
going on there. I do like that James Vowles that he kind of stood up to Mercedes because I think Toto put him in that role. He's like, "Oh, this is great because I can make Williams my bitch,
make it the
now, and
junior
they can be
team.
like
Yeah, that,
my
Yeah.
out
yeah,
my Alpha Tauri." And then he's like, "No, we're not taking Mick.
yeah.
Like our repair bills are enough with Logan. Thank you very much."
Yeah,
And stood up to him because Williams they have felt like a junior team to Mercedes now. Well, because obviously they got the Merc engine since the hybrid era, but also Susie very conveniently got that development driver role when Toto was on the board of directors for Williams.
Peter, be careful.
And then
Susie earned that role.
and then she retired from all motorsport around the same time that Toto sold all his shares in Williams as well, and yeah. And obviously Bottas came from Williams to Mercedes. It's all connected. And it's like, that's not the kind of team that Williams should be. They should be a team that stands out
Independent.
and stands up in their own right. But they haven't been that for a very long time now.
Yeah. Toto actually got a rude awakening. I think he would have, when he actually got hold of Mick, he would have had something like this in mind that he could place him in a place like Williams and just alongside Albon and let him grow and things like that. It is impressive to see how James handled that thing.
Yeah.
Do you think, again, I think this might actually reinforce my point. Do you think Logan is still part of Williams in 2025?
No.
Jason?
He's just he's just not there. I mean, he was in his junior career. He was perfectly good. I mean, obviously, he came very close to beating Piastri in Formula 3, and in Formula 2, he was kind of on the level of what Jack Doohan has kind of been doing, I guess. And he knew, okay, get this many, finish here, and you'll get the points for your super license, and you've got the seat or whatever. But he's just not. It just hasn't worked. Is the thing. There weren't even any. It's hard to think of any standout moments last year because the only point he got that because of a double disqualification, and he never outqualified Albon. Only once or twice maybe did he get out of get out of Q1. I mean, even
Q3, yeah. a
I
few
mean,
times.
Zandvoort was interesting because didn't he crash in Q2, which basically guaranteed him a
No,
spot
no,
in
no,
Q3?
no. He reached Q3 and then he crashed in Q3.
Yeah, but then in the race, the race
Yeah,
wasn't
he
his fault. But I
crashed
was really
and
angry because obviously you can tell that they haven't raced in the rain in a long time because the pit bulls were just clueless on what to do in those first few laps. They left him out for ages, and he dropped back to the last, and then he crashed because the suspension broke. So that wasn't his fault.
yeah,
But I was like, you just wrecked what had the potential to be a really good
Yeah.
race for him, partly
Yeah,
through the
yeah.
car braking and the pit wall being useless. But there aren't any standout moments. That's the problem. It was very Kazuki Nakajima, just being slow and lots of breaking front wings and stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Jason,
Yeah, I don't think he sticks around. I think, unfortunately, I think Logan has underlying talent and pace, but I think, like many F1 drivers, it just doesn't convert over. So unless he has a really solid season this season, I don't see it. I think there's enough talent going around now and not enough seats that they can find someone else to even if they just want to help with development for 2025, it would be better off getting someone more experienced somewhere else, or bring back Vettel to Williams. Anyway,
Yeah.
no,
Lance
not to
Stroll.
Williams. He'll come back to Red Bull.
Even though like Logan seems to want nothing to do with American motorsport, he'll probably just end up in IndyCar
or Haas
at some point.
Yeah, so many of them. Oh no, Haas is probably one of the more pseudo-American teams that I've seen.
Yeah,
There's nothing American about Haas.
Haas are trying to be a B team to Ferrari. They're not the American.
They shouldn't be
team.
on F1 at this stage.
I mean, yeah, we'll get to that as well. You know, when it comes to Logan, I'm last season when I actually sat down and I did my whole this predictions when it comes to teammates. My prediction for Logan was that initially he might struggle a bit, but by mid-season I expect him to challenge Albon in qualifying at least, because during his junior season, what I've seen at least, in I think he was Oscar's teammate twice in junior categories, and both the times he quite comprehensively out qualified him. Like it was a bit like 10-2, 10-4, something like this in Logan's favor. Then he reached Formula 2. He was teammates with Liam Lawson, and once again he was quite clearly superior to him in qualifying. Again in the races you could see that he was maybe being a bit measured at the end of it, but in terms of standout races Logan had a few. So you can't say that he was blown out of the water by Liam, even though Liam was in his, I think, second or third season while Logan was in his rookie season. You take all that, you see that there is talent and potential. I just feel when it came to Williams in his first season, he probably got a bit overwhelmed. He saw Albon do things in the car that he did not think was possible, so he tried pushing a little too much. That is what worked against him, at least in my view. Maybe in the second season, if he's calmed down, he's taken, you take a step back, you see where you went wrong, and if you're able to identify the areas where things didn't really go your way, and then try to do things again, it might work for him. I mean, looking at his potential, I won't be surprised if he challenges Albon in at least in qualifying. But again, ideally, if you look at the trend, you do see him kind of getting booted out, especially with Kimi Antonelli sitting in Formula 2. Mercedes has a progression plan in place, that's for sure. They want Kimi in Williams in 25, and then they want to see if he's good enough. In 26, he will be in Mercedes, 100%. So next up, we have Alpha Tauri, or
Visa Cash, Visa Cash App, Racing
Cash
Bulls.
App, Racing Bulls.
At the moment, their name is just because they deleted their Instagram, so it's just
yeah,
it's nothing. I actually thought for a moment that your video got stuck or something.
Their name is
yeah.
Okay, so first of all, Peter, go ahead.
Well, this brand change, I mean, they didn't need to be called Alpha Tauri because they said it was to rebrand it. It's like, yeah, but you don't need to rebrand it other than to advertise this fashion line, I guess. But Toro Rosso, at least, there are still people that say it should be Minardi. It's like, it's not, it's been Toro Rosso for long enough. And it's the Red Bull junior team. It's always been Toro Rosso. And now they're changing the name again to Racing Bulls, which is too similar to Red Bull. And they're throwing in a bunch of like crypto sponsors on the top of it as well.
Yeah, it's Visa Cash App, isn't it?
it doesn't really operate in the way that it used to, because it used to be, okay, you spend a year or two here and then you move up, and if you don't, you get fired basically by Helmut. That's how it works, because it's a stepping stone to Red Bull. But now people are spending. Well, now, obviously it's different now, because Red Bull are actually good, so they like to be a bit more careful about who drives for them, and they don't. There's not. People are spending too long at that team. It's becoming more and more separated from Red Bull, as sort of functioning as its own thing. Because like Gasly went back there, and I think he left because, well, I'm not going back to Red Bull, so I may as well go. And it's the same with Ricardo. It's like, what is the point? It's designed for juniors, so you shouldn't be there. Like that's where Tsunoda and Lawson are the obvious choices, because that's what it's meant for. But I think, again, people are starting to question their relationship with Red Bull, because they're like, oh, we're going to copy their design, and it's like, so you're just going to be given the schematics from them probably for the car.
Yes,
because obviously in the past that's what they used to do. It was the same car with a different engine.
2008.
Which one year ended, which is weird, because in 2008 that having a year-old Ferrari engine suddenly made it better, and then in 2009 the Red Bull was the best car, and then the Toro Rosso was the worst car, and all that was different was the engine. That was enough to make the difference, and that was very strange.
I think 2009 they made changes to the regulation. In 2008 they had the same car.
20 to 2010 they had a new that was their first new car that was theirs. But 2009 it was 2010 2009 it was exactly the same car, but they had a 2008 spec Ferrari engine.
Was it? Anyway.
But 2010 was a completely different. It was 2010 when they got rid of the customer car rule, and that was when they had a completely different car.
Okay.
Because when you look at those cars, they're exactly the same. The Toro Rossos, the Toro and the Red Bull in 09, they look exactly the same. I just don't understand this endless need to keep changing names to advertise something which has nothing to do with Formula One as well. Like, it's there for the fashion brand. Like Benetton.
Actually, there is a reason behind it. The reason is, since Dietrich Mateschitz is not there anymore. So what we have is basically a new corporate structure, and in that corporate structure, what they want is, since they're investing in two teams, they need output. They need something in return. Earlier, even if Toro Rosso was finishing in last, Dietrich did not have any issue. He didn't really care too much. Now we've reached a point where it's basically a board looking at Formula One. Okay, one team is winning and it is doing the best possible job. But the second team, what is it doing on the Formula One grid? That is precisely why they have Daniel in place. First, because of the marketing prowess that whatever he brings. Secondly, they've moved the AlphaTauri base to whatever that team's name is, base to Milton Keynes, because there will be exchange of ideas. There will be some people.
Moved it?
Yeah.
Not completely, but they are moving most
the base
of it.
from Faenza partially.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason why they're doing this is because they want the team to be at least a midfield team. They want some return on their.
What I heard was, when I talked to people at Red Bull when Dietrich died, what I heard was the team was initially going to be sold. So obviously they said they're never going to sell, but essentially they got offered, I think it was 650 to 800 million by Andretti, something like that, or that consortium.
Yeah.
And they were initially planning to just take that and run, because the reason that Dietrich didn't care about where it was Dietrich initially bought it partly for a junior team, but also partly because the other engine manufacturers and other teams were able to group together and outvote them on issues. So he figured having two teams would be helpful. He also got it for a steal as well. He bought Minardi for next to nothing when you think about it. But then essentially,
there's only one. I think he had just one clause, right? That the base will be in Faenza and no one will be fired.
Yes, something like that. I think it was. Yeah, but
essentially,
then after they got that offer of 800 million, I'm not sure who it was in the team, but basically the guys at Red Bull again that I spoke to just said they were convinced. The directors were convinced that basically they could share more and make the team to a point where it would be not only profitable, but because the valuations are continuing to go up, it would be short-sighted to sell it. I'm guessing this was like Christian and Helmut and Nui. more so wanting to keep that kind of political say because it would give them two teams for votes and so on. I'm guessing that's where it came from. Obviously, I never confirmed that. But essentially, they managed to convince the directors of Red Bull itself that the team would be worth well over $1 billion in 3 to 4 years' time, and therefore it would be pointless to sell now as long as they could figure out how to make it profitable in the short term. And the way to make it profitable in the short term is bring in sponsors, align it closer to Red Bull, and basically take all of Red Bull's parts within legal realms and move the team closer. So
basically the Ferrari Haas
exactly,
relationship.
but on steroids, because what they're going to do, what they're trying to force to, what they're trying to force, is it Jody Egerton is the team, technical lead?
Something like this.
He wants to continuously build more parts than they need to, but they're basically trying to force him to say, look, let's just take the entire mechanical platform from Red Bull and then figure out the aero on top of that.
Build on it.
He wants to, I think, just take one part of the suspension, for example. The reason I think they'll be 7th is because...
That is also one of the reasons why Franz Tost was actually let go. It was a voluntary retirement or a push. He was pushed into retirement because France has always had this vision that Alpha Tauri will be a separate team. It will have a separate operation and everything, and that's how he kind of went about it. But then the last 3 seasons have been poor from Alpha Tauri, so something had to change.
Well, I think personally, I think they'll be 7th this year ahead of Williams, because I think that even if they don't out of the gates, I think they'll take basically the entire mechanical platform from Red Bull, and we've seen that mechanical stability is kind of the building block for these regulations. Once that's sorted, then it's, the aero is secondary, and I think that's going to give them a jump over Williams this year. So that's where I think they'll be. I think just purely based on the fact that they should be able to use that to kind of jump to maybe where Alpine is in terms of performance.
Peter?
Well, I think the lineup is stronger, even though it's the wrong lineup than it was last year. Because, De Vries, that crashed and burned. He was very lucky that he shat all over Latifi in Monaco, Monza even. And
Nick De Vries needs to actually, if there is one guy, someone who can actually attribute his career to Nicholas Latifi, it has to be Nick De Vries. He won his title against Nicholas Latifi in Formula 2, and then he comes to Formula 1 in one race where the car was going to be good and his teammate was Nicholas Latifi. His entire hype is built on beating Nicholas Latifi.
Even though his whole career is just him falling upwards and stat padding, we can say for certain he's better than Latifi. We know that much about him.
It's a high bar.
But yeah, again, a Mercedes. Again, it's only logical that a Mercedes Junior would suddenly join a Red Bull team and do all of that. That makes perfect sense in this day and age. Ricciardo is better, but Liam Lawson did everything he needed to in those 5 races, and he should have kept the seat. It's obvious they go. I think as well, there's going to be things changing at Red Bull because obviously losing Mateschitz. I think Helmut Marko, his days are numbered.
He's 80 something now as well.
He has a very archaic method of dealing with drivers, and he keeps getting himself in trouble by saying stupid things as well. And
he's an Austrian Clarkson in Formula 1 basically, but without the humor.
Yeah. And saying that, Perez, he's not as good as Max because he's Hispanic or whatever and stuff like that. And
South American or North American? I don't.
I remember when he said that and the wife said, he said what? And I was like, he said basically that Mexicans are lazy. And she's like, yeah, most of them. And my wife is Mexican, just for reference.
I think, to be fair, that's a very, obviously, Top Gear have milked that one. The Mexicans are lazy joke a lot. But I think because I think people are wrong because he said South American as well. It's like, it's not South American.
And also alluding to the fact that, Senna was from South America. So how do you work that one out?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also Mexico's not in South America. I think that was my key issue with it, was I was like, an Austrian getting geography wrong is probably the most offensive thing an Austrian's ever done, except for that other one, other Austrian, which we won't.
Yeah. We'll see. Obviously, 7th is kind of where they should finish, because across their entire time in F1 as Toro Rosso, it's been 6th or 7th. Is a lot.
So you're putting them ahead of Williams, right?
No, they'll be behind. They'll
Eighth,
go.
then you think?
Well, actually, that's the thing. You have to factor in De Vries being there for half the season. Maybe they could be.
I think they will
actually.
purely on the mechanical platform alone. I think if they can, like, if they don't take the entire suspension platform off of, but if they don't, then something is horribly wrong.
They're not going to be imitating Red Bull being as so much as just being
that's the point. Though,
it.
if like the entire Newey designed that suspension, it's the key reason why Red Bull had such an advantage at the start was that suspension. So like, if they don't take the best suspension, which they can just be handed at a fair price under the regulations, then Red Bull should just sell the team because they're doing something wrong.
They will. What's going to happen is this season AlphaTauri is going to make a huge leap. The team will be 5th fastest and it will finish P5 in the constructors. Because it has two good drivers. Neither of them will actually outperform each other. So you'll have two good drivers.
So who are you putting them in front of in P5? Because you've got Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari. You think they're going to do better than Aston Martin? Oh, Jesus. We can't be friends anymore. Sorry. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I think they will be because, look, I think what we've talked about already, the fact that there will be a lot of correlation, a lot of things that will move around from each teams. I think that you'll see a jump. I think we also saw a jump last season as well, where they basically started the process of.
I want them to be P2.
We'll see a.
Just because it would be so much fun. Twitter would be so much fun if they were P2.
It will
be
erupt.
So much fun.
What will FIA Red Bull or something, whatever it is. I mean, I think it will be P5. I will not be surprised if. I think maximum P5. I'm probably overreaching with them, but I think they can do that. I won't be surprised.
Okay, you're insane, but okay. We'll see how it goes.
And in terms of driver line, look, I'm not sure. I think Ricciardo and Tsunoda lineup might.
I think it'll be Lawson and Tsunoda. I think it's a reasonable choice for 25.
But the thing is, it goes against the philosophy of actually making the team profitable. You're saying that Daniel will move to Red Bull, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that scenario, if Daniel does not move to Red Bull,
then Ricciardo and Tsunoda continue because Tsunoda is bringing in money from Honda.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's what I think. Actually, I have a feeling we might see the same lineup next season unless Ricciardo retires because he does not want
Lewis Hamilton to Racing Bulls. That's what we'll see. 2025.
Oh, the world will melt over. All hell will break loose. Okay, now I think the newest team in Formula One, Stake F1 team, Stake F1 Sauber, whatever it is. First of all, I'll start. Arguably the most invisible, anonymous, and boring team in Formula One, in my view. The team did nothing. The team was the two drivers are. You blink and you miss them. That is the kind of nature that the two drivers have. There's nothing charismatic about it. There was no standout result. One race the two qualified well, then they had a fuck all start in Hungary, and I think they took over both. They took out both the Alpines as well, so they basically did their job. Other than that, I'm slightly worried about how Audi is going to pan out because of the way at least until now Sauber is actually performing, because it's been pretty poor in the last couple of seasons, even after the news has come out. If finances are actually coming and if Seidel is actually there, where is the team going? What's the growth and everything? I just don't see it. I won't be surprised if it is again P9, especially with the kind of lineup that they have.
I mean, I used to be indifferent to Sauber, but now I just hate them because they just have this. They have this repeated identity crisis where they keep changing their name, and with this, I don't know. I guess it depends on their name on the constructors.
Stake F1
they're actually
team.
Still Sauber.
They change their name. They make the car similar to how that Mercedes used to look, and yeah, there's nothing else interesting about them. At least they did that. at least.
Because in all of my data and stuff, I list Alfa Romeo as I link it with the original actual Alfa Romeo from the 50s and the 80s, and not as Sauber, even though it's basically Sauber. But it's I don't know why they just keep needing to change the names all the time, and particularly with at least this is not a manufacturer, because that wasn't really Alfa Romeo, because if it was, it would have been in Italy.
It wasn't. It was basically a patch-up job. They paid,
Yeah.
I think, 20 million per year for that kind of thing.
And I mean, BMW Sauber, that wasn't. I mean, BMW owned most of the team, but it wasn't really BMW. It would have just been called BMW if it was, and they would have had their base in Stuttgart or Munich or wherever, not in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Hinwil, yeah. But if they were just always Sauber, that would be fine, because they would give a lot of continuity, because Sauber have always been there, and even though they'd never been good except when they were BMW Sauber, they've always been that constant presence in the midfield, just being there and not being very interesting, but at least making some reasonably pretty cars. And
Sauber had some good cars in 2012, 2013. They were decent.
Yeah, and they had a good lineup, because that was when they had Kobayashi and Perez and stuff, and they were being interesting because they had really interesting like strategies, and the drivers were popping off when they shouldn't be, and it was all good.
And then
but
Manisha
now,
Keltenborn happened.
Yeah. And then they ended up with these fuck ugly cars with drivers that, well, one good driver and one shit one that they decided to back and sabotage the good one for, and then just make the team worse. And then they didn't bother trying to sabotage Leclerc, because they knew that wouldn't work probably against him and Ericsson. But
they ran Antonio Giovinazzi for 3 years.
The most boring, useless driver
and just
in recent memory.
Seriously.
And Kimi, obviously, it was Kimi's retirement home. It's Bottas's retirement home. Joe is just being really Joe is one of those drivers where, you know, he does 2 or 3 seasons and nothing happens, and he's a slightly more interesting version of Charles.
I
mean,
God. He had to go to Charles Peak.
I mean, Joe is a lovely person, and he has a bit of a personality, because obviously he has, like Lewis, he likes to dress extravagantly and stuff like that. So you can see he's got some personality. Bottas doesn't have anything going on. His personality is pretending he's Australian for some reason, which
drinking
is
loads of beer, not wearing clothes.
Yeah, but the thing is that they're on track. They're both just desperately boring. They don't do anything. They don't perform well. They don't even try and fight with anyone. And you don't see them all race. I mean
even
when
they have a good qualifying, you know they're going to have a bad start. At least with Haas, you know that the car will slowly die down and have an ugly death. With Alfa Romeo, with Sauber, it was so sudden. You know, as soon as they had a good qualifying, Bottas will have a poor start, and he had that same thing in Mercedes as well. He hasn't really improved.
And with Haas, you can also bank on the car splitting in half or bursting into flames or something.
Yeah,
just doing something interesting, not just gradually getting slower as the race goes on. There's no ambition there, because they would have put Pourchaire in if they had any ambition.
I still can't understand why. I mean, Pourchaire is not. He's F1 worthy. I mean, if Joe Guanyu can be in Formula One, Logan can be in Formula One, then Pourchaire should be in Formula One.
For me, I
don't know.
So the thing is, up until this steak rebrand, it kind of made sense for me what they were doing, because I think I said to you, Sharon, back, what was it? Maybe this was a long time ago, but maybe it was 2022 actually. No, it was 2023.
No, it was in the
preseason. I remember. I know I said it on my podcast. I'm not sure if I said it with you, but I remember saying that I was expecting one of two outcomes from Sauber in 2023, 2024, and 2025, and either they would have an incredible 2023 season where they do better than ever, and the reason is that Seidel goes in, Audi pumps in, and they decide to try and basically pressure test the team and see where all the faults are, or they essentially sit back on their laurels, don't really work that hard and focus on just building the inner team up and not worry too much about the on-track performance until 2025, when they then focus on strategy. That's the year when they're going to use that as a mule car for testing the engine as well for 2026. And they basically switch off development for 24 until 20 or 23, 24, 2025. They put a little bit in just to start getting those cobwebs out. And essentially that's what I expected. And that's what 2023 seemed like to me. It was like, okay, we've switched off. We're focused on just getting the team ready to become the Audi team, nothing more. And that made sense in somewhat. But then it seems to me like, why did they take, like, when I was hearing that, okay, well, it's going to go back to Sauber and it's going to be Sauber F1 for 24 and 25. That made sense. But taking the stake money kind of goes against that theory in my head, because it's like, wait, if Audi are pumping money in anyway, you've got Joe giving 30 million, I think it is, a year or something, or his sponsors, some crazy amount. Like, it made sense to kind of sit back and do that. But now taking the stake money, it's like, it tells me that there's something not right. Like, it just seems unnecessary. And also, I mean, if they went to Sauber and then just bigged up the fact that, you know, this is becoming the Audi team, then Joe can become more of an Audi ambassador. And Joe being there was a great idea because it could preempt some extra sales for Audi in China. But the stake F1 move and keeping those two drivers and just getting money for it just doesn't line up with me to the entire plan. So I'm just a bit confused about what direction the team is making.
It's actually, you know, there's what this move has done is it has started to make sense why Red Bull was not interested in signing with Porsche, why the whole thing fell through, because this is one of the typical corporate, this is how all these corporate boards work. They will try to minimize the expenditure unless it is necessary. Right now they can do that, and if it makes a mockery of the team, and it literally makes them look like a complete joke. Look, what the hell was that name? Stake F1
Stake
Kick
F1
Sauber.
team Kick Sauber, yeah. Which is, by
Yeah,
the way, what they're
the
actually
hell was
registered as on the F1 constructors list.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in half of the places stake is even illegal. I think it's a betting website. Or is Stake the betting website, or Kick
Stake is
the
the betting website. Kick, I think, is the streaming
Kick
website.
is the
So I
streaming
think in
website.
certain things it'll be
Yeah.
Kick F1 team or whatever. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, if they're not allowed to advertise alcohol or tobacco, you shouldn't be able to advertise gambling websites as well.
Which is unfortunate for
ideally
companies,
that-
because
that
addicts
seems
are
to
the
be-
easiest people to sell
That
to.
seems to be the price that we pay, that we can't have Marlboro and West and even Durex anymore, but instead we got all this crypto
Yeah,
bullshit.
but why
that all
can't
the
we have
teams are
Durex?
jumping.
I mean, why?
Well, we can, but I guess it doesn't. Obviously, the thing is, the teams are trying to portray, I guess, a family-friendly image, more or less. Even though all the drivers are very dirty-minded and that, but
Except Lewis, who's grateful for everything.
yeah,
Which is the
Yes.
yeah. Anyway,
I mean, best fans in the world.
Mm.
I actually forgot my chain of thought. What was I even talking
Stake.
about?
Kick and like.
Yeah.
because one of
we
them-
need to move on
yeah.
from steak
Yeah,
quick
so-
as well,
so
because
the-
it's lunchtime for me and it's making me hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened with them was, I think, only until right now, what I can actually make sense of was the fact that there's a lot of this corporate nonsense that is happening, and Seidel is actually just trying to navigate his way around the team. He's been away from the track. He's kept himself, I think, intentionally away from all the action. He's in the background. He's working. But at some point in time, you have to ask a question: why will any driver be interested in signing for this team? What has it shown on the track that, okay, in 2026 we'll be Audi? Okay, fine, you'll have an Audi badge on you. Where's the performance? Where are the people that are actually going to produce the
Yeah.
results? Most importantly, how is that bloody power
But
unit going
again,
to work?
this is
There's
the
no-
reason I said that when it was supposed to just be Sauber, that made sense, because then you kind of assume that behind the scenes there's a lot. Yeah,
Money
there's
is
a lot
coming.
going on. You know, Audi doesn't need them to take on any sponsors because Audi is directly giving them some investment, or at least the payments that Audi is making,
Yeah.
which is like $200 million a year or something like that at the moment. They're paying to buy the team out because it's a $600 million deal, I
Yeah.
think, if I'm not mistaken. So like,
I think it's more than that. It's
no,
more than
I think
600. Because if I remember correctly, it was close to 800 that
No,
Andretti had offered
but that was
Saber, and Saber
they
rejected.
rejected. No,
Okay, yeah, it's a
exactly
75%
because
stake.
Finn Rousing didn't want to give up his share. That's why Andretti didn't buy in the end.
Yeah,
And Audi were okay with that. But yeah, so the fact that they're taking on money, like I get that every team takes sponsorships, but it's just like, are you not? Does
it's a
Audi
bad
really
look. It's
want? Yeah,
basically a
does
bad
Audi
look.
really want now for 2 years to be related to a gambling site? Basically, like it just doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah,
Because I get that in any sport and in Formula One especially, that you depend on sponsors for funding, but I don't. They shouldn't just have to be at the mercy of them, and everything becomes about the image of the
especially in the
sponsors
budget cap.
and sucking up to them. And we saw this, or come to this with Haas. Like with Gunter having to do those photo shoots with the
Boat.
whatever that home, the boat for that like home design shopping company or whatever. It's just stupid stuff like that. Like making it all about everything is always about pleasing the sponsors, and this is why they police so much of what the drivers can and can't say as well.
Yeah,
And it's just like it's just I wish it didn't have so much control. If it was still Sauber, you would have that sense of continuity in history and heritage, and you think, okay, well, I feel like I'm joining a proper brand rather than a team that's just desperate for money and
yeah.
doesn't know what it's doing.
And there's
Well, I'd
nothing
much
to
rather
show
say
for
I
it.
drive.
I look
Yeah.
if they have a shitty name and they have a good car, we won't mind. But they have a shitty name, they have a shitty car, they have a invisible driver lineup. What's there to
well,
look
I'm
forward to?
just
At least for the
I'm
next
just
two
glad that the
seasons.
next team we talk
Yeah.
about, is much
Is
more
brilliant,
invested
you
in
know?
this. Sorry. Anyway,
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, just to sum it all up, I think in my view again, I think P9 is the best I'm actually looking at. I don't really see much in there, in at least in stake F1 Saber's future in any which
yeah.
way. By the way, the driver lineup, what do you think? I don't see either of them being a part of the team. The driver lineup that I think might be there is again based on the reports, and they do make sense to an extent. Hulkenberg and Ocon might be the two that they might sign, a midfielder and a German.
If
But again, that happens or not,
I
I'm not
think
sure.
there is a small, and I mean a really small chance that Joe sticks around, and the only reason I say that,
Jesus,
the
if he
only
does,
reason I say that
I will hate.
is because I think that since the new president or new director of VW or Audi took over, he wanted to do a review of everything. He seems a little bit less interested in everything. Obviously, he was just reviewing the numbers, which makes sense. I get that, but he just seems less on board with the whole thing from his whole conversation around it.
Yeah,
And I could see him going, well, why don't we just keep a Chinese driver on board? It'll up our numbers in China of Audi and Volkswagen, and we can recoup some of this investment.
yeah, because that's
It
fucking
is,
dumb.
but
That's
but
why.
boards of companies when it comes to things like motorsport tend to be quite dumb anyway. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm just hoping that having Andreas Seidel, who actually has an experience of navigating the waters in both Audi
yes,
and Porsche and being successful, I hope there is some. He knows how to
if
combat this
he
thing. That is what
is
I'm
in
hoping.
any way pushing for the future right now, he is selling his balls off to Norris and Sainz, because that would give him a
Yeah,
very
he
strong
should.
lineup for 2026. I don't see it happening,
Yeah.
but it would be, that's what he should be doing.
Or get
Or
Albon.
Albon as well. Yeah.
Get Albon as well.
Marketing gold as well to reunite
Yes.
Lando.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As well,
100%. Make the
Yeah.
team interesting. For
And they're two,
fuck's
look,
sakes, make the team
regardless of whether
interesting.
Yeah.
people rate them as like, championship worthy drivers, they're both two capable drivers that don't have any accidents, that can adjust to any car and will get the performance out of it. So it would be a good lineup.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening, but
Go for
it
it.
would be a solid move.
Let's see. Finally, the best team on the Formula One grid. Yeah, Haas.
Sorry also for cursing on your
Okay,
podcast. I just realized. Sorry.
Yeah, even I have ended up doing it a lot. That's okay. Yeah. So talking about Haas, first of all, Peter, you want to go ahead?
I suppose with Andretti on the horizon, Haas is to Andretti what the Miami GP is to the Las Vegas one, in that they've basically been usurped and we don't
It's
need
the
them
discount
anymore.
version.
Because this is This is not. It's not an American team. I mean, the closest thing they've had to an American driver was Santino Ferrucci, who got fired because he drove around.
I'd actually say Fittipaldi was the closer one.
I mean, yeah, because Fittipaldi, he's American. He's American born, but he's a Fittipaldi.
Bring back Scott Speed.
But yeah, otherwise they've never. Or even you could even argue. I mean, Gutierrez, North American, as a Mexican,
At least
they had that.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise it's not. I mean, the car's built by Italians, the engine's all Ferrari suspension. Dallara built the car. Well, they did until recently have an Italian team principal, and now they've got a Japanese one.
He says he's American. I have no idea why, but apparently Steiner continues to. I was covering him, so apparently he's been told. Sorry,
Komatsu?
No. Steiner. Gunther Steiner is American.
Yeah, he's gone.
No, well, he's lived in America. Oh. I mean, that's how he got the gig because he was living in Charlotte at the time. But he's from South Tyrol, so Italian, but speaks German.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but he's from a German region or a formerly Austrian region of Italy. It was funny though because when they first announced that Ayao Komatsu was taking the role, they had a picture of Gene Haas, and I looked at us thinking, why does that extremely white guy have an extremely Japanese name? It's like, okay, it's Gene Haas because he just looks like he's aged about 20 years. But yeah, it's part of their radical change to basically get rid of Gunther and put in his second in command.
Really shake things
that's
up.
Going to change everything, but. Yeah, Haas is obviously they're an entertaining team, or they were an entertaining team, but it's just depressing because of how difficult everything has always been for them. Because we've seen that 2018, even at their best, when the car was reasonably good, they had races like Australia and they had Grosjean being useless for half the season. And now they've had endless problems with sponsors and
was it 2018 where he just crashed for no reason and blamed it on Ericsson?
Baku, he crashed behind the safety car. Then he set a smoke screen as he spun in Spain as well.
Yeah, I think he took out
obviously
2-3 cars. I think he took out Hulkenberg.
He took out 2 cars, Hulkenberg and someone else.
Yeah.
And then Australia, obviously, they had the double, pit stop blunder that cost them like 20 points or something. And then we've had, the rich energy scandal, and then everything with Uralcoli and Nikita Mazepin. It's been a very entertaining train wreck. But this year there wasn't any of that. They were just slow and boring and nothing.
Probably
that's
why Steiner was fired.
I mean, because there was nothing interesting going on. But it's not. They didn't even, because when they first joined, it was like, okay, it's a new team, and unlike Lotus version HRT, they're well funded, so maybe this will be all right. And they're an American team, so that's going to be fun. And then we're like, there's nothing.
Plus, they had this very interesting business model of basically picking up everything from Ferrari. So there was something.
That was a major red flag. But with Andretti, they're at least suggesting that they might try and play on the American image by having like Cadillac as their power units and
bring an American. But also Andretti has vehemently said from the start that they plan to design their own car, which at least is, even if it fails, at least is an attempt.
In essence, it's a Formula One.
The thing is, basically. I don't get Gene's approach to this at all, right? So Gene is saying he wants to move closer to...
Okay, before we proceed, tell me one thing. Before we proceed on that, was firing Gunther Steiner the right thing or the wrong?
I don't think it makes a blue balls bit of difference, if I'm honest with you. I think from a marketing perspective and from a sponsorship perspective, it was the wrong one. From a performance on track perspective, I don't think it'll make much of a difference, because I think Steiner was essentially cut at the knees anyway, because what else could he do? Gene wasn't going to invest more. And Gene talks about how he wants to have a closer relationship with Ferrari, but what is that closer relationship to Ferrari? They're buying all of the spec parts that they can from Ferrari. They're legally not allowed to copy the bodywork, so they're still going to have to do that. So, he's literally just gotten rid of a marketing asset to replace him with someone who was there anyway. So it literally makes no difference.
Can they just rename themselves Scuderia Italia? Because then they have cars built by Dallara that just look like Ferraris, but aren't.
They would probably make more money for Haas if they just turn themselves into a new Sky Electric brand that just makes knockoff versions of Ferrari F1 models. That would be
which is what they do right
but just
now,
not have to
essentially.
do it on
If you,
track and
if you,
just sell
if
them
you
in
look at
shops.
it.
Like I get Gene's point of view where
Yeah.
clearly it's making him money for his Haas automation and he's not investing anything, but it's like Alpine but without the expectations. Like they just think that they should be able to do it more efficiently without putting more money in, and it's like that doesn't make sense in Formula One, because right now you've got Red Bull, who are clearly ahead. You've got Ferrari, who obviously they're not going to beat because they're just trying to copy Ferrari. You've got Mercedes, who will clearly be ahead of them. You've got Aston Martin, who will clearly be ahead of them because they're investing massively and they've got a team there. You've got or Racing Bulls, who are just doing the exact same thing as Haas essentially, but with complete
From a
and with
better team.
complete support and an actual direct relationship. So obviously they're going to be able to do it better, and they have investment, and they have, Then you've got Sauber, who's going to become Audi. So they are investing, even though it doesn't look like it on track at the moment. So they will jump ahead of them. And you've got Williams, who are investing heavily right now and are at the cost cap. So all Haas is doing is saying, listen, why don't we just cut the shit, run around a tenth at the back and sell some more automation machines until eventually I get bored of this and sell the team. But I don't want to sell to Andretti because
Tell
I
me
hate
something.
Michael Andretti.
How much?
That's basically where we're at.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the whole stupid thing. By the way, tell me something. How much will Haas be valued?
Still 800 million, I think. Yes, because
so?
just
They don't have the capacity of a normal working
That's-
Formula One
yeah.
team. Half of the stuff is actually being
Yep. But
It's
the
outsourced,
average value
And
of
they-
a
they
Formula
don't
One
have
team is like
that
$1
kind of
billion now. So if you
infrastructure.
just came in, slapped up some stuff,
No, the average value of a Formula One team is close to $1 billion, but that is because they have the infrastructure in place. Haas
yeah,
does
but
not.
I mean, Andretti would pay
And even
800 million for it tomorrow. So it's worth 800 million. How much
I
do you pay?
don't think so.
If you were willing
don't
to pay a
think
pound for a can of Coke, then a can of Coke is worth £1. And someone would be willing to pay 800 million for Haas, and therefore Haas is worth 800 million.
No, that's
These are
fine,
simple
that's fine.
economics. You should know
No,
this.
that's
You're
fine.
Indian.
That's fine, but the issue is if you're putting that kind of money, you actually need a return. Right now, the issue that Andretti will face is if they buy Haas at $1 billion, and look, if they're trying to if that kind of money is on the table, Haas will sell it in a
No,
heartbeat.
I don't think so.
Why? Because the team is not in a heartbeat. The reason being, it's not worth.
Well, they
it's
were
not worth
offered
that
600
amount. The
million.
reason
and
why
turned it down.
every other team
Andretti
who
and the
offered them?
consortium offered Gene Haas, yes,
Haas?
600 million, 650, I think
I
it
think
was.
what I'd really, that's dumb of him actually. I don't think it would be.
Well, I mean, think about it this way:
But again,
if
he knows
Andretti
it.
want to get into Formula One, even if they were accepted, right, and the entry cost stays the same, even if you said that, right, you're talking $200 million before you even lay the foundation on anywhere. Whereas you could buy that for.
Yet we are not even sure about that. No, the thing is the anti-defection
Yeah.
cost or something. It might
Well,
be
and
close
if
to
it does,
600 million,
therefore, exactly.
apparently.
So Haas, even in its current setup, has the facilities to put a car on the track. Therefore, it is worth around 800 million easily.
But you'll have to invest close
Yep.
to 400-500 million to actually get to that.
But if
that
you were to start
infrastructure
your
in
own
place,
new,
right?
if you were to
That
start a new
Williams
team,
or-
you'd have to do the same. So, at least you have
but
working
you'll not
facilities.
be- Acha, okay, yeah, roughly
And
on
you've
that-
got the
on
relationship
that.
with Ferrari.
No,
You know what I mean? So
my-
you've immediately got a car at the very least.
You won't get that. No, you won't get that. Apparently, Andretti will have a relationship.
No, I know,
with,
I know.
God, I'm saying
Yeah, I
this.
know, I know.
Alpine.
But what I mean is, if they bought Haas,
Jesus.
yeah.
Alpine
But if they
Haas,
bought,
yeah.
if they
I-
bought Haas, they would have the access to Ferrari.
You know, I completely lost interest in in Andretti after I actually realized they might
Yeah,
have
but
a
the
relationship
Alpine
with
engine
Alpine.
isn't that bad. To be fair, it's
It's
only
like-
the engine.
It's gonna be like Wolf.
It's the
gonna be
worst
like,
engine on the worst engine.
It's
on
the
grid
fourth
right
best.
now.
It'd be like Wolf Williams, just Alpine Haas based in Hinville. Just the
Wouldn't
most
that be
boring team
amazing?
you can think of. Yeah.
Yeah.
combined
I've lost
together.
all interest in Haas anyway. I think personally, I just think I have no interest in it.
Yeah.
I'll,
Really.
I'll start being interested again when their cars start blowing up again.
Yeah, I
Or
think that
when
would
their
be
They
fun.
should
drivers
just-
start being useless.
They should just start cheating.
yeah.
They've got nothing to lose. They should just blatantly cheat.
yeah.
What worse can happen? To be honest,
Even
they
if they're
should do that.
disqualified, at least they'd be good on the grid, and then they're 10th anyway. So
I mean, do you want loads of backmarker teams to do, which just only fill the car up halfway with fuel so they can be fast and then break down halfway through the race?
Yeah, that'll be
Because you've done
fun. That will be
something.
fun.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Because
qualify poorly. Look, they qualify well anyways. Better to run the car on half a tank at least. Have some
I don't
fun.
understand that we've been through 3 different generations of cars since they joined, and all of them have had the same problem of not being able to make their tires work or go the distance. And so, I don't know what's going on.
I just love one instance. It was in Austria 2019. I think I talked about it. I talked about it with you, Peter. There were 2 cars. One was driven by Magnussen, one by Grosjean. Magnussen, after 2 laps, said his tires are overheating. Grosjean said he cannot get temperatures into his tire. That's 2 cars. That's 2 cars with completely different issues. I don't know. I mean, the team is it's a complete joke. But the problem right now is that it's not even doing that. It's become a bit. I think next season, what would be the good part about Haas? I think they might start well because again, I expect Ferrari to be better, so maybe Haas will be better. But then again, as the season progresses, it will be same old shit. You won't see anything happening. And probably, I think that's the last season of Magnussen's career.
Yeah.
About time.
Yeah.
Well, Magnussen and
put to
Hulkenberg
sleep
aren't
now.
going to be hired anywhere else. So this is like Hulkenberg. I love
Probably
Hulkenberg,
yes.
but like,
Probably
who
yes.
else is going to hire them?
I mean, what's it like? Hulkenberg's turning 37 this year, and Magnussen's going to be 32. He's the same age as me, roughly. They are a bit old. I mean, because obviously now Mazepin and Schumacher have put them off ever wanting young drivers, and they've never shown any interest in giving a seat to Fittipaldi, even though he's been their reserve for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
And in the race that he did, in the 2 races he did do with them, he was actually quite good. But now he's going to IndyCar. I don't know if he's still a reserve for them.
He's basically a reserve at F1 TV.
I don't know how much money. I don't know how much money he's got behind him. If it's more that because he's a Fittipaldi, that's just a good name to have.
Look what happens when you are a South American. I think please tell me Brazil is in
Yes,
South America.
it is.
I hope I'm not wrong. Thank God. Look what happens is when you're a South American, you've earned all your life in dollars. That money is basically a generation wealth. It's not going anywhere. So they just put. I think Nelson Piquet also has. I think he also has a new son that is probably coming through the ranks.
Bring in
Not doing
Montoya.
that well, but
There's Pedro.
Sebastian.
Pedro did F2
Montoya.
for a bit. Yeah.
Pedro
Those are the
Piquet.
2 kind of rival. Those are the 2 rival sort of Brazilian factions, the PKs and the Fittipaldis, in kind of the racing world.
And they used to be apparently when he was coming up, Piquet was a huge fan of Fittipaldi, but then Piquet started opening his mouth, and whenever he does that, even now, shit hits the roof. Yeah. So okay, in terms of, I think it's the last
7th.
team. I don't see it will be
10th.
7th. 10th.
11th if a new team enters halfway through the season.
Yeah, I won't be surprised. Yeah. Anyways, so we've gone through the 10 teams.
I mean,
It's taken a while.
we're 3 hours in, so I mean,
now coming to the second part of the video, we've gone through the 10 teams. It's basically a rapid fire. We'll go through we have a few questions in place, and we'll share our predictions. I think a few of them are
I think we've
self-evident
answered
right now.
most of them.
After we've gone through the teams, we've gone through the most of them actually. But yeah, let's see. First of all, okay, champions. I think it's not a huge surprise. I think Max Verstappen is probably the
Alonso,
Who are
Aston
you
Martin.
going with, Peter?
Sorry.
Max, yeah.
Max, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not much of a surprise. Okay,
It's just a question of
Yeah.
when he gets the title. Japan, Singapore, well, not Japan because that's the beginning. But, Singapore, Monza, that region.
They should
How
just
early
give
do
they
you
should
do
just give him the
Monza.
title in Bahrain if he wins, and just say, look, can you just bow out for the season so we you can have the title, but just kind of
We
let's
can have
enjoy the
fun.
rest of
yeah.
Maybe that should be a new rule. When you win the title, you can't
F2
race again
rule.
for the
Yeah,
rest of the season.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not for the same season, right?
Yeah, but obviously you can come back again.
You take a
next year,
season
but
off,
you
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
put someone else. Just put Liam
Yeah.
Lawson in the
Yeah,
seat
yeah.
after him, and just have
Yeah.
some fun.
Okay. By the way, who will come second in terms of teams first?
Aston
Oh,
Martin.
McLaren.
Do you have a Lance Stroll in the
Yep.
in the
Lance
team? If Aston Martin is
Lance
coming
Stroll will be
second,
in a crucially injured bike incident before the start of the season.
and
And
we'll have
yes,
Sebastian
yes, yes.
Vettel
I
driving the
am
car.
personally going to make sure that happens. However, for legal reasons and for evidential reasons, please delete this from the podcast because I'll be in court. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. Even in my view, I think I'm
buying a
going with McLaren.
Cybertruck purposely to
It
take
will
care of
be
Stroll.
second. You do that. Okay, in terms of drivers, who will be second? Please don't say Perez.
I'll say Lando on. Well, actually, I don't know. To be honest, I was going to say because I think McLaren are second. You'd say
Yeah.
Lando, but then Lewis is going to blag it somehow. Probably
Alonso.
I think Lando. Yeah,
That Lando,
Alonso.
yeah.
Okay.
Leclerc.
I'm wearing a Leclerc cap, and even I don't agree with you.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. You have to.
I
have
literally,
faith in
I
this.
spent 70
Okay, I
of my,
think-
or 60 of my own dollars on this cap, and I still don't agree with you. So, yeah.
Okay. I think we went through it a bit. Do either of Lewis or Fernando retire at the end of the season?
The more likely one is Alonso, but I don't think either of them will.
Okay, who is more likely?
Alonso out of the two of them is more likely. However, both of them essentially have a 2025 contract. Lewis does have a 2025 contract. Alonso has a 2+1, which means, and it's on Alonso's side as far as I remember getting that confirmed by someone. So I think he sticks there. He's getting a big bag of cash. Why bother walking away? He can pick up another few podiums either way. I think, it's worth it.
I think Lewis is more likely to retire at the end of the season. If we have to pick either of the two.
If you want Twitter to be fun, that would be an amazing outcome.
I know. It won't be, because then where will the
No,
team
because
mileage go?
it'll be fun because basically
half of
it'll be a 2024 Twitter season of people just complaining that F1 is dead now because Lewis is gone and nobody's watching it, even though for some reason the viewing figures will continue to go up. So,
Yeah, I think someone shared this thing that when Lewis was dominating, the figures fell dramatically. As soon as Max started dominating, the figures have been rising, and yet Max is blamed for. And apparently Lewis is a star and Max is a nobody.
yeah, typical.
Fun times. I think we went through this one as well. Lewis versus George. Who wins?
I think
this
we
one?
all said George, didn't we? I think, yeah.
Yeah. All three of us. This is basically an anti-Lewis Hamilton podcast. We're going to get chat on for
Fine.
no reason whatsoever. Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. Will either of them win a race this season? And if they do,
I
who
think
will
there
do it
will
first?
be a win. There will be a win. I'm going to say
I-
Lando, but it probably
I
will
have
end
to
up
say
being
Lando
Piastri
because if
first.
it's Piastri, that's going to be heartbreaking for Lando. But yeah, I think they will. I think they'll win more than one race. I think there'll be 2 or 3 McLaren wins this year.
No, I mean who wins it first out of the two?
Lando, I hope.
Lando starts quite strongly in a lot of seasons, so yeah, let's go with him.
I'm going with Oscar. Basically because he's an Aussie. And these days Aussies are more likable than Welsh. He's Welsh, right?
No.
Lando.
Yeah.
No, he's from Bristol.
How many races will Max win this season?
Season 24.
24.
Yeah.
Oh God, there's 24. At least 15, I think. If we assume that there's one win at least for the other top teams, 15 minimum, but probably closer to 20.
18.
Jesus, if he has another season with that
18.
many wins.
He's about 2 seasons. He's only 2 seasons away from overtaking Schumacher's win haul, and then half a season after that he can beat Lewis. By 26, he could be looking at 100 wins.
Oh,
He's
God.
on 54 now, so if he won every race, he'd be on 78. and then that's over 100. If he wins every race in 25, that's 102 wins.
He'll be 28
The
at that time.
the
Yeah.
the Team Hell H podcast or Twitter is going to be so much fun if that happens.
Hamilton was when Hamilton was 28, he just joined Mercedes.
Yeah,
Like,
and he
yeah.
was
And Vettel at 28 was in his first year with
four-time world
Ferrari.
champion. Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
four-time world champion by then. He had, I think, 30, 35 something wins, Vettel, in that time.
Yeah, he got 14 wins with Ferrari, I think. So he'd have been
39.
on that 39.
Yeah,
It was mid 2015 when Hamilton overtook him for wins.
yeah.
As well. So Hamilton was on about 25, 26.
So I think Max is going to get eight
So
championships.
what's your number?
18, I'm going to say.
18. And Peter, how many? Did you
20.
say?
Let's say 20.
Jesus. Okay, first of all,
Assuming the car
yeah.
just keeps never breaking.
We just need Alpine to swap the engine out
Man,
for the season and see what happens. Yeah.
or Ocon to crash into him again while he's being lapped. That hasn't happened for years now. It used to happen all the time with back markers of takeout drivers, and it never happens.
I mean, the field is too congested now. Oh, man. I hope it does not cross 15. I'm really hoping against hope. Less than 15. Okay, I'm going with less than 15. And you know what's astounding in all of this? He has, I think, 19, 15, and even this season we are all expecting him to be in that particular vicinity. The next best is 13. There's no one that has even come close to him. Shit, man.
And that's just over half the races this season. That's how long it is now as well.
Yeah, but the thing
He
is,
could
it's
beat that-
not
he
too
could-
different, right? It was 20 races, 2021 we used to have, even in 2018, 2019.
The
So, I
fact,
mean,
what makes Verstappen's 2023 season even more impressive, I think, is because of how long it is. It's not the amount of races he won; it was the win percentage that makes it so impressive. I think
yeah,
because it's
Seriously.
insane.
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. Okay, Lewis or Fernando, who will win a race?
We have to stick with the. We have
Don't
to.
say Alonso, man.
Listen.
Come
It's
on,
it's
don't be
Alonso.
anti-Lewis.
For me, it's because the Mercedes is going to be the better car, and the thing is because Lewis he's been hinting at things falling into place. So I think eventually something will fall into place.
If I listen to the Team LH on Twitter, Lewis has been in the wind tunnel single-handedly building the car, and therefore he should win. But because I said some nice things about Verstappen once, and everyone assumes I'm a big Verstappen fan, even though I respect how good Verstappen is, but I'm not a huge fan. I don't find him that interesting off the grid, if that makes sense. It's just like impressive to watch, but I end up rooting for someone else. I think it's got to be Alonso because no driver has won a race after their 300th race. So if anyone needs to win another statistic, it has to be Alonso, right?
Yeah, that's true.
No.
Yeah, nobody has done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Wimbo made a
think
video
so.
on this, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he did. Okay, I think Lewis will. I don't think Alonso will have the car to win.
Alonso's going to fight Max for the championship this year. It's going to be down to the wire. No, Alonso will win the championship in 2026. 20 years after his last championship. I'm calling it now.
Gee, imagine if he does that.
I think isn't he now the first driver to be if he's here next year, he'll be the first driver to be around 20 years after.
I think so,
winning
yeah,
the
something like
title.
that.
Most people, it's no more. I think most other drivers, it's no more than 10.
Because 20-year careers are rarity. I think Alonso has the longest career, right?
He started 2001, wasn't it?
Yeah, he does. For a long time, for a long time, Graham Hill had the longest in terms of years because his was for 17 years, and so when he left, that was 13 years after he first won a title. He was there from 58 to 75.
Michael
and Hamilton,
had
2012, wasn't it?
Michael had 21, but there was a 3-year gap in the middle, obviously. So for him, that was 18 years after his first title.
Oh, I get I get what you're saying. So it's after the first title is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Get you. Sorry, I thought you were saying after the last,
Everyone else, I think, the only other drivers like PK10, Lauda, 11, 10 or 11, 10. Yeah, Lauda 10. Most other drivers, there's no more
Lauda
than 10
retired in
years.
84.
85.
84
Yeah.
was his last title. Yeah.
Yeah, then 85 he retired, so that was 10 years after his first in 75.
Wow.
Yeah, I think in most cases it's no more than 10.
Yeah. 20 years. Imagine if he does make it happen. And it will be, it will actually make 26 fun. I really don't think it will happen though. But anyhow, how many drivers will win a race this season?
So
4,
Yeah.
I'm going to say.
Man,
we seem to be stuck around the 3. Because last
So I've
season
got-
it was 3.
optimistic. Yeah,
I've said
be
Max
more
Verstappen
optimistic.
18. I don't think Perez is going to win one. I don't.
He will. There will be a race there.
So I
there will
think
be a
I think
Baku always.
I think 3.
But Baku is in
I
the
think
second
3.
half of the
I think
season.
it'll be
Why
Verstappen,
then he takes
Alonso,
papers off?
Lando Norris. Yep.
That's it.
I'm setting my
Yeah,
expectations.
Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, and Checo.
Yeah, see,
I'll take
I'm
it
setting
for-
my expectations
okay,
low
Verstappen.
because I want a good season. So I'm
Verstappen, Perez, Lewis, George, Norris, Charles. That's
never
it.
going to happen.
Hey, we've had a season where there was 7 different winners in first.
Yeah,
7
that
races.
was a
One can
long
only-
time ago.
One can
now.
always hope.
That was a
I
long
was
time
alive when
ago
that
now.
happened.
2012, wasn't it?
Shit, it's been a decade.
Yeah.
2012. Yeah. I was
7
still
winners in 7
graduating.
races. With 6
I was
6
still in
champions on the
nappies in
grid as well.
2012. Yeah, I was.
Yeah,
I
of
was only
course.
what? Yeah,
Who's
I was
that?
only.
I was just starting.
2012 is 12 years
2012.
ago now.
Wow.
So
That was
I would have been
Yeah.
22. So I was just starting my first business. No, my first official business. I ran businesses before, but I wasn't legally allowed to. So yeah, it was my first.
I was 19 and just starting uni.
Yeah, I was in my 3rd year. I was how old? I was 20.
I had dropped
21,
out of
yeah,
uni for the first time.
that time.
Good fun. Anyway,
Wow.
I did. I went back and dropped out again
Okay.
afterwards. It was great fun. Anyway,
Huh.
did it for the poontang.
I
No,
went to
I'm
uni
joking.
twice.
Anyway,
Okay. So I'm going with 6. You've gone with 4 and 3, 4, 6. Okay, let's see. How many drivers will score a
that's a more
podium?
difficult one. Yeah.
A lot
Can we
more.
just leave it there?
That's
A lot more.
Okay. Just for reference, last year we had, I think 7 or 8. No, more than that. There were 6 different teams, and other than Lance, everyone got a podium. There were 11 different podium finishers last year. Fuck.
Wasn't his win his first podium, or Monza was his first podium? It was something insane.
Monza was his first podium.
I think George got like 1 as well.
2.
So I
George
think
got 2.
2. Yeah.
from the
George threw away quite a few podiums. No, he threw away the Australia podium, then Singapore, then Silverstone. 3 podiums he threw away. I mean, through luck and everything.
I think everyone in the top 5 teams, with the exception of Stroll, and for just sheer shits and giggles, Hamilton gets a podium. So I think 10.
Wow.
a whole that would be a new record, Hamilton. A whole season.
I
with no
like
podiums.
if we're holding me to this, if there's something in this in terms, I'm not going to bet that because Hamilton will absolutely get a podium. But just to go on the fact that we've all been kind of jumping somewhat on the driver, then I might as well throw it in just because I want you to get more views. So the more people who shout at me, the more views you'll get. So there you go.
So okay, I don't think either of the Haas drivers are getting a podium because the car can't last that long. Saber is pathetic. Let's leave that one aside. Then we have there are 4 gone. What other team is
Williams,
Alpha Tauri or whatever they're called now.
there? Alpha Tauri will get a podium.
It's only in freak races do they get podiums.
I think I think Daniel was P5 last season in Mexico. He might. This year the car will be better. So, okay, first of all, last year we had top 6 teams getting a podium. Totally 11 drivers got a podium. This time around, let's make it top 7.
so you think 13 drivers?
No. I think,
12.
12. 12, roughly 12.
Yeah.
I'm keeping it at 12.
Or we're just gonna get
Obviously, I'm excluding Lance.
Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, or Verstappen, Perez, Norris, or Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton, and it'll just be that the whole way through the season.
Oh shit! Wouldn't that be a very? Oh god!
I mean, 2015 maybe only had 5 or 6 podiums finishes.
Yeah.
That year was.
Do you remember?
Both
Was it
both Ferraris?
even if we just go?
I think both Red Bulls.
And maybe some
even if we go back a
Rover.
couple of years ago, it was like ham for
like
bot for basically every race for a long. That was the joke. Yeah,
I hated that.
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. Okay. So I think again the final was who would be last in the championship. I think
Verstappen,
we've
because
done
he
that.
gets disqualified because
It would
Red
be-
Bull cheat every year.
Yeah.
If not Magnussen, then Logan Sargent.
Actually, this is something to bet on. Who would be the last in drivers' championship? It would be Logan or, I mean, it's such a low bar. Logan or Kevin Magnussen.
I was just
even
going to say
Joe,
Joe.
brand new.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. How
Yeah.
can you forget him?
Because
So-
Bottas can occasionally pull a decent result out of his arse.
I'm going to go K-Mag
Yeah.
because I do think that the Haas will be worse by a country mile. But then he could get lucky and score a point, and Joe or Logan could have a pointless season or something. So
I think
Yeah.
they've already admitted they're on the back foot, or like development is delayed or something like that. So they're going to be starting.
yeah, I'm going to say
from
K-Mag
behind
because I think
everyone else.
Hulkenberg, even if it's just between the two of them, then Hulkenberg I think beats out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, even I'm going with Magnussen. I think he had a poor season. He's done. Basically, what Hulkenberg has done is he has killed Mick Schumacher's career completely by dominating Magnussen the way he did last year.
Bring back Schumacher.
Anyhow, okay, so we're done with the predictions as well. Yeah, I don't think Mick Schumacher's coming back.
Nah, he's finished.
He's done.
I've got a better chance.
No chance.
Yeah, he's going to go do endurance racing. Maybe he can resurrect his dad's sports car career with Sauber Mercedes. Pick up where he left off. In a universe where De Cesaris never sprayed a taxi driver in the face with pepper spray.
That's a universe we don't want
The
to
world
live
would
in.
have been different. Yeah, I agree. Anyhow, so we're done with the predictions and the preview.
Now on to
It's
part
been a long
3.
one. First of all, thanks, guys. Yeah, we'll move to part 3 now. Who the hell wants to sleep? So by the way,
no
thanks,
worries,
guys,
man.
both of you, for sticking around. I mean, we've been at it for close to 4.5 hours now. Shit.
This is the longest
That's a long
podcast I've been
time.
on.
Yeah.
Anyhow, okay, by the way, thanks guys, both of you, for being here, and thanks to everyone for watching, whoever has stuck around. Or I'll add the timestamps.
If you're
I'll add the
here and
timestamps
not
everything.
subscribed, there's something wrong with you, basically.
If you're here at this time, there's something wrong with you anyways. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.